together. And roll call. Melissa.
Here.
Pete. Here. Kat.
Here.
Charlie. Here. Doug. Doug's kind of here. Hello, Doug. Doug's a little under the weather today, so he is standing by via Zoom. And David Harwood will not be joining us. He had some family issues to attend to. But for those of you that have attended are we online?
We are.
Online, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to those that joined us in person. This is to go over the budget for fiscal year 2026. And if you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with that, hold off with Shane for just a minute. We have our representative from Raleigh, Ray Pickett, here to give us some updates on some bills, I believe, upcoming issues. Ray, it's yours.
All right, thank you, Charlie. I wanted to give you a little update. I know y'all are very familiar with the housing bill that attempted to get through this session. It ran into some issues. For all intents and purposes, right now, it's going to lay right where it is. There was some issues with some members that didn't like it. Not sure why it was a local bill, but needless to say it was. And I'd like to ask if there's any questions dealing with this bill, please go through me. Please don't notify other members of the General Assembly about this bill. This was, much as I say, this was handled in caucus. So that's where it has to stay until we bring it up another way. But please just relay all questions directly to me, not any other member, and especially not the speaker. So that's just where that needs to lie. Right?
It's just for, this bill didn't have a number. Which bill?
It was House Bill 306.
It was 306.
Oh yes, it was just on the point of going on the House floor, and it met its demise. Doesn't mean it's dead. Just means it's a little bit more difficult to get moved along, but I will continue to see if what I can do. It might take till next short session to do anything, but just please notify me with any questions you have about that.
Ray, did this surprise you in any way?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
I kind of thought it was.
It should have been.
Yeah, it
Yes,
should
there were no questions through 3 committees. Not a single question about it, other than exactly what it does. It wound up in caucus, and that's about all I can say about that. Like I said, caucus stays in caucus.
Thank you.
I think some of you are familiar, House Bill 765. That's the bill you better be worried about. That bill goes through, it's changed numerous times. That bill goes through, it just about limits your job. You'd almost be useless. You would pretty much just worry about, I'm not sure what you would do with this bill, because it would almost strip your powers. Ordinances, you would be overridden. You would be held personally responsible. They could take you to court personally, not as a council, and be up to 10 times the amount of attorney fees or court costs to the other side. So this is a very important bill that locals need to keep a close eye on. We've slowed it up. There's some other members that are with me that have the same concerns. There's many things in the bill. Everything in it's not terrible. There's many parts of it that it would pretty much relegate. You would not be able to have ordinances for single family areas of town. They could just come in and it would limit you to what you could say. They could come in and town Blowing Rock our size, St. Paul's into the population. They could go into residential areas and put multiplexes, townhomes, whatever they want to do, up to 4 to 5 units per acre. And believe me, I've heard from some of my neighbors, they're not particularly keen on that, needless to say, since this is Blowing Rock. There's some provisions in there that if someone comes in and there's water or sewer not there, you'll be forced to put it there. At your cost, not theirs. So some of that stuff has been put in, pulled out, put in, pulled out. We're still, currently, it has not been heard in committee. It currently went through one committee. It's sitting there. I've had some caucus members that have some issues with it. So I'll keep you up to date as much as I can on that. There's a few other bills that were in the Senate. Don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but they did not make crossover. So they would have to be put into another bill that's already over there and sent over, but I'll keep an eye on if any of those come over. Some of those were, short-term rental was one of them. You would have no say over short-term rental. Auxiliary dwellings, you would have no say over that, whether it be they can have them or if you can require parking. Yeah, it pretty much said you couldn't require parking. Whether they're going to park it or not, you got one, but that was going to be part of it. Those are the major things right now that we're looking at. The League of Municipalities is helping me tremendously, helping go through these bills as they bounce around. They keep an eye on them for me. They're doing a lot of help. Any questions about any of those? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
In your opinion, Ray, why did this change all of a sudden to strip power away from council and local government?
It's coming from, they're using it as saying we need more workforce housing, we need more affordable housing, but something along that line may work that way in Statesville. It's not gonna work in Blowing Rock. Blowing Rock's different, Boone's different, West Jefferson's different. Every town's different. That's the reason we have local government. At least it is in my eyes, because I sit where y'all sitting at. We should have some say-so in what we do.
Who's driving this?
Home Builders Association. Yeah. That they want to be able to put more units on a piece of property. In some areas, that would work fine. But my response to them, which I always use Blowing Rock because I know our ordinance is better than anywhere else. If someone comes into one of our residential neighborhoods and tears down $1 million house, they're going to put 4 $1 million townhomes. They're not going to put 4 $150,000 townhomes to help workforce housing because they couldn't build them for that.
So, Ray, what is your feeling about the general temperament for passing this bill?
For the 765?
765.
It's got some roadblocks ahead of it, for sure. There's enough of us that are questioning whether that should be done. You know, there's still quite a few people there that serve locally, and they still like to see local governments have say in what goes on in their area, because it's theirs. They were voted in for a reason. And if people really want the ordinances changed, they'll vote in a new group of people and tell them we want our ordinances changed. But that's up to each locality, to me. Blowing Rock should make decisions for Blowing Rock. And I will continue to say that.
Is there anything we should be doing to help you or others in terms of letters or?
Right now, I think we've got it slowed down enough. The league is fighting it very hard, and they're doing their job. And so am I and a few other
You let us
representatives.
know that
Yes.
we need to.
Yes, if I think this is going a step further, I'll let you know, send a resolution. We've had a few from a few towns that sent some resolutions in opposing this bill and a few other ones.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, well, I'm gonna head to Raleigh.
Thanks, Ray.
Y'all have fun in this budget situation. I'll see y'all soon.
Bye. Ray.
How you live out in the road?
Mr. Fox.
Thank you to Representative Pickett for sharing an update. A lot of what we're going to do today, you've seen, some of which you haven't. Part of what we used to do during the budget workshop is we would go through the budget line by line by line. started on the PowerPoint a few years ago, get a little bit more of a bigger picture overview. I've changed some slides to get a little more detail, whether that's on the operating side or salaries and expenses or benefits or capital or on the debt. So I have added some more detail. At any point, we can stop and go to the book and go into a little bit more detail or go into the past. I've also got last year's budget, audit, et cetera. So it's a little bit informal, but it's also a little bit structured, which is kind of how I feel about putting together this PowerPoint. So this is a similar agenda to what we had back on May the 13th. Again, I've added a number of slides to get a little more detail with some of the actual changes with operating and salaries and benefits, et cetera. But we'll start with just quickly going over the objectives and our calendar, and then we'll go into our general fund. That is our largest of our two funds, water and sewer being the second and the smallest. Within the general fund, it's kind of broken up into those four parts that you've heard about in the past: our operating salaries and benefits, capital, and debt service. And again, a little more detail than what we've had in the past with that. But this is your budget workshop, so if you stop me, we'll stop. If Doug's on Zoom, we'll stop, and we'll be able to answer any questions we can, and we'll try to let the public, which we are Zooming this or videoing this, know where we are as well as we flip into the book, and I'll handle that side, let them know exactly where we are within the budget itself. All right, so our budget objectives have not changed, and they shouldn't change. Number one, it's a balanced budget. So obviously revenues and expenditures balanced. We do have this year the utilization of fund balance, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, how much we're using, what that looks like from a percentage standpoint, where we were at the end of last year. We'll flip back to the audit and talk about what we added. But it is a balanced budget. Priority-based budget, simple or fancier way of saying these are needs. I do not feel like we have wants in here. These are the needs in which our department heads have put forth. We were able to trim some of them down before you get to what you have here, but these are the needs of the town. So what you have before you are priority-based or needs-based, not wants. We always are looking to maintain or improve our service levels. I think as we go through the salaries and benefits, I'll talk a little bit more about the quality of employee we have, and I don't think anybody in this room doubts that. We have the very best workforce, not only in this area, but I think potentially within the state or within local government as a whole. And I think that shows each and every day. It shows when we have needs, whether it's 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. So we're always looking to maintain that, if not to potentially improve that. It's something we're always striving. And then we're always looking at the future. So this budget is an annual budget. However, there's a lot of things in here that are preparing us for next year and even the following year or 2 or 3 years down the road. Especially when we get into our debt and our capital. We're looking at our fleet schedule as we've kind of scheduled out the replacement of vehicles and some of our fleet replacements. And then our debt as we're preparing for roll-offs, et cetera. So we're putting together an annual budget just for one fiscal year, but we're always keeping an eye on the future and what that looks like. Our calendar is ever going. I put up here that we evaluate daily, weekly, monthly actuals versus budget. Ms. Brown, who is not here, and I should have started out by saying that, who is in Spain on a much-needed vacation, but is actually watching this, which I told her not to, but she is watching this
What time is it
from
there?
Spain. I think they're 5 hours ahead of us, right? So we're in the afternoon. But she is watching this via her telephone, I believe, from Spain. Is not here. She's on a much-needed vacation. That being said, Ms. Brown and the finance department and our department heads evaluate the budget throughout the entire year. It's a never-ending process. It never stops. It's always a process, evaluating the budget. So that's a check mark because that's something that we do and we will continue to do. Our department heads and our meetings started on the budget back in March and continued in April, now in the end of May. That's a 2 or 3 month process. Again, they're following just like Ms. Brown and the finance department. They're constantly receiving their updated monthly reports from the budget, following along their budget, making sure that they're staying within the budget. So it's something that we do, again, daily, weekly, monthly, those actuals versus budget. On the 13th, we're able to present the budget publicly. Something that I think is lost when we give you the budget. It's the first time the public has access to the budget. So on the 13th, that Tuesday night, a couple weeks ago now, we handed you the budget at the end of that meeting. We also put it online and had a copy available out front, and that's been the case for the last 14 days. So that's checked. And then today, 2 weeks later, we are here for the budget workshop. So the point of today is to go through as much detail as we possibly can, answer any questions that you have. And then as we flip to June the 10th, that is when we have our public hearing scheduled. So whatever changes come today will be presented again June the 10th, and that will be when we open up for the public hearing for the public to come and participate. Public is here today. We do have some in the audience, but they're not allowed to participate. This is for you all to ask questions of us and department heads to be able to answer those questions. So, start with the general fund. That is our largest of our budgets. The highlights I like to put first because I think it's better to kind of give a little bit away, but also let everybody know some of the key pieces here. We do not have any proposed proposed property tax increases in this budget. So as you flip through, you will see our tax rate still at 40 cents. It was at 40 cents last year. We'll go through some more detail on what that looks like. We are proposing utilizing some fund balance to balance the budget. Diversification is the name. We've talked about this year after year after year, and every year it becomes more diversified. Our revenue portfolio is a very diversified portfolio. You'll see a pie chart in just a few moments. We do not solely rely on property taxes like other places may. You'll see again where our percentages are and how our percentages have changed over the years. And the reason for that is tourism. It's our sales tax, our TDA revenue. They continue to be modest with increases or steady as you go. We've had some record years in the past couple of years, and we don't necessarily see those changing. Sales tax will go into more detail, just like the TDA. Our sales tax revenue this year has been truly record-breaking. We're seeing the highest sales tax numbers that we've ever seen. On the expense side, flipping over, one of the biggest things and one of our biggest expenses are our salaries and our budget, our benefits. Salaries, we're proposing a 2.5% COLA for all of our full-time employees. A couple things that we don't necessarily have control over. One is our retirement system. So all of our full-time employees are a part of the North Carolina State retirement system. We're seeing 6% increases across the board. So that's a 6% times everyone's salary number. That's a big number. We'll talk through those details in a few moments. Again, that is a mandatory change. That is not something that we control. Health insurance. We switched over from a Blue Cross Blue Shield state plan to an Aetna plan January the 1st. Within the first couple of weeks of that switchover, we started hearing rumblings that they were going to start going up on cost. We are currently with Aetna through the end of the calendar year. However, we are planning on looking to potentially go somewhere else as we get into the summer months. And so we have put a 5% increase in there as we're looking to potentially change that. That's a placeholder. That's not a guarantee. It's not a known, but it's something that we put in there just to make sure that we have a placeholder just in case as we shop to see what other rates are out there and other insurances are available. Debt payment annually this year is relatively flat, but our total debt is going down. And then we are continuing our capital plan. Again, we're going to go into more details on every one of these bullet points, but this is our highlights before we get into the details. All right, our revenues, we'll start with our pie chart that we talked about. Property taxes make up 45% of our overall general fund revenue, sales tax 23%, our TDA is 15%, state collected, that is our PAL bill and franchise tax 4%, sales and services is primarily planning and zoning and park and rec fees. Other is a little tricky, and we'll get into that in just a few moments. We have to gross things up. So when we receive sales tax from the county, we have to remit it back, same with the TDA. There's some things in here. Also, what's in here is our proceeds. So as we show you in a few moments that we're proposing a little bit more than $400,000 in new vehicles and fleet, that $400,000 actually goes down as a revenue. So if you spend $400 over here and have a loan, you have $400 over here as a revenue. So these are accounting things. It also goes into the 7%. So a little bit tricky there. Transfers and interest, we do transfer a little bit of money to our capital project fund, and interest is the money that we're making off of interest is 3%. Questions on the pie chart? All right. So talked a few moments ago about how our diversification continues to be more diversified. If you go back just a few years ago, our property taxes were about 50%, and our sales and TDA were combined about 33%. So between these two, 83% of our overall revenue. We flip it over to today, our TDA revenue is now going up to about 6%, give or take, a little bit less than that over the last few years from an overall percentage of our revenue, and our property taxes have actually decreased a little bit. That's not saying our property tax revenue has decreased. No revenue has decreased. However, the diversification, the allocation of our revenue sources have truly become more diversified over the last few years, if that makes any sense. So as tourism, I put down here why, as tourism has grown, which is our industry, we're not Lenore or Hickory or those that are off the mountain dealing with industry or economic development from an industry standpoint. Our industry and our economic development is tourism. We have seen our tourism number, whether it's TDA or sales tax, continue to grow year after year for the last number of years. That's why you see our percentage here changing. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. I think most of us know the more diversified you can be, the better off you can be. In the last 5 years alone, we have gone through a pandemic and a hurricane, of which changed our revenue sources during those times in different ways. We've been able to weather both of those, no pun intended there, we've been able to weather those two events because of our ability to be diversified and how our revenue is being collected. We talked back on the 13th, property taxes in a lot of places make up 2/3 or 3/4 of their budget. That's a problem when things happen. Major things happen. People can't afford to pay their property taxes. You're seeing counties, and we'll see counties and towns in West North Carolina that are going to be on the verge of bankruptcy this year, if not this year, the next couple of years, without state or federal or someone assistance coming in. Because you're hearing stories of property taxes at the end of the calendar year. Now we're getting into a new calendar year and beginning to end the fiscal year. You hear stories of those property tax percentages being collected that are in the 50% range, 60% range. Our collection percentage has always been in the 99-ish% range, and we don't expect that to change this year. When you have folks that have lost their homes or they've lost their jobs and they don't have the ability to pay their bills, the property taxes are going to be the last thing that they pay, more than likely. This diversification is a big thing. It's a good thing for us. Questions so far before we get into property taxes? Okay, here's a slide that shows our property tax base. So we are currently sitting on a base of $1.747 billion. That is what makes up the town limits. That is all of our residential, that's all of our personal, that's all of our commercial values. 1.74. Go back to 2022, 5 years ago, we were at 1.22 million. Then we had this thing called reappraisal. Again, just for everybody's sake, and I'll continue to mention this, the town does not do the reappraisal. The counties in North Carolina do the reappraisal. All 100 counties are charged with doing a reappraisal at least every 8 years. Some do it 4 years, some do it 5, some do it 6, some do it 7, some do it 8. Watauga County did theirs back in 2022. It took effect in 2023. So we did not have natural growth of 1.2 to 1.6 million in 1 year. This was reappraisal of our current property. So we had a 35% increase because of that reappraisal from what we had in 22 to 23. Since 23, you can see a steady increase here of about 2 to 3% each year. Other years that don't have reappraisals as a part of them, that's a very typical thing in Blowing Rock. No matter how many years you go back, we almost consistently grow about 2 to 3% in natural growth. That's new building, that's renovations, et cetera. But 2 to 3% is a very typical thing. And that's what you see here from 23, 24, 25, into 26. Here's our big year of reappraisal. I will say that even though we had a 35% increase, the timing in 22 was actually better than what we've seen in other places. Since 2022, these are the counties that have had reappraisals done. So in 23, 24, 25, Ashe, Caldwell, Mecklenburg, Union, Dare, Catawba, you see their percentages much higher than that. I say that to say Watauga County rolls back around as another reappraisal year. They went on a 5-year cycle, 22 to 27. Unless something drastic changes in 27, we're going to be talking about where we go with our tax rate at that point, because more than likely, if these counties have grown that much in the last few years, chances are we've grown as much as they've grown. So, yes, sir.
Shane, the last reappraisal for Watauga County before 22-23 was when?
It was 8 years before that, so 2014. And saw a pretty flat, if not decline, in 2014. So really the last time an increase was represented in Watauga County was the one before that, which I believe was 8 years before, which would have been 2006. So the 35% increase was a big one, but we were on that front edge. We were right coming off of the increases. So the timing was actually good. I say that to say, as we get into property taxes, again, I always say this, nobody likes paying property taxes. No one is ever excited about paying property taxes. That being said, our 35% was pretty staggering at the time. Last few years, those numbers have only increased. I would bet just about anything, unless something major changes, we're going to have some pretty significant increases that we deal with. Again, but that's a county first driven, and then it comes to us. That would be for the 27-28 budget. 2 more from that, so we've got some time between now and then. Property tax rate proposed this year, 40 cents. No change from last year. We went up 1 penny from year before to last year. We went up 2, that was that reappraisal here with this year down and back up changes. So our property tax rate, and the purpose of this slide is to show that our property tax rate has been relatively consistent. If you go back a few years before that, you're back in the 40s and the 30s. We systematically, and you have a chart within your book that shows some years and what that looks like. We have been in the 30s to the 40s for a long time within the town. One thing that I always want to point out, in 2014, when the bond was passed, it was proposed to increase taxes 10 cents at that time. Because of the favorable interest rates and the way that we structured out the bond issuance, we never realized that 10% increase. We ended up at about 7 cents of that 10 cent overall. So we never got to that point because we ended up receiving favorable interest rates and some better savings, so to speak, because of smoothing out the issuance of that.
Of course, that is the bonds, the voters voted on, and they approved the 10 cent increase.
Correct. The voters approved the bonds with the understanding that at that point, without a crystal ball, that staff and council believed that it would be about a 10 cent increase. Put this up here to show the consistency within what we have from a tax rate standpoint. Again, no proposed increases this year. Looking pretty similar to what we've had the last few years. You know, I think it is important to pop up a few slides like this just to give some relative numbers to what our area is looking like. So again, these are based on 24-25 rates. I don't have everybody's rates and what they're proposing right now because everybody's timing is different within this. Ours last year 40 cents, we're proposing 40 cents this year. Boone's at 39. I always tell a funny story. I believe secretively Boone will always be 1 penny lower than us, and I don't know why, but they always are 1 penny lower than us. So I don't know if that's based on anything other than just my suspicions. But Boone 1 cent lower than us at 39 cents. Manor 46, Hickory 46, Wilkesboro 48, etc. through here. One thing that I also like to mention, and I'll continue to mention, Watauga County currently has the 3rd lowest tax rate in the state. Was number 1 for a period of time. Now they're number 3. Clay County, I cannot remember the other county that's less than them. I think it's more now. County could be less than them. But Watauga County has the 3rd lowest tax rate, property tax rate, in the state of North Carolina, out of 100 counties. So if you live in the town of Blowing Rock, like we do, we pay both taxes, the county tax and the town tax. If you add those two together, again, Boone's going to be 1 cent less than us because Boone's in Watauga County as well. Here is the effective tax rate of what you pay if you live in any of these towns, whether you live in Banner Elk, Hickory, Beech Mountain, Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro, and Lenore. You see some pretty drastic differences there. I say that to say these are good things for me to point out because I believe not only staff, but I believe you all over the last number of years have really worked hard to keep these rates low and consistent. So it's important to point this out. Again, not advocating that we need to significantly raise taxes other than to say, again, nobody likes paying property taxes. It is important to point out the numbers and what they do look like. So effective tax rate for the town of Blowing Rock, 72 cents on $100. That's how it stacks up with our northwestern North Carolina neighbors. All right, so here's our value looking at the last 3 years, our total base at 1.7 million, our tax rate at 40. That's a typo, that should be 39. We're 2 off there. The point of this slide is to show the value of a penny. So if you were to talk about taking away a penny or adding a penny, it puts $178,000 into the budget. That's the point of this slide. That's just to say if you were to make a decision today or you make a decision in 2 weeks to cut the rate, you're cutting $178,000 in revenue. If you make a decision to add a penny, you're adding $178,000. Again, it's a big number, but it's not as big as maybe what some people may think because, again, that diversification, it's 45% of that budget, of the revenue budget and what that looks like. Any questions on property taxes? Okay. Sales tax and TDA are the next two, and they're very similar in a lot of ways. Overall sales tax, as it's presented in this budget, is 10% higher than last year's budget. And if you recall what we talked about back a couple of weeks ago, that sounds like a drastic increase. It is a big increase, it's 10%. That being said, we are already beyond that for the current year. So what we budgeted last year was a very conservative number. We are running about 12 to 14% above last year's budget currently with actuals. And here we are on May the 27th. So we have taken last year's budget and added 10%, which we still feel like may be a conservative number. We'll say that's not even flat growth. That may be a little slip back, decline within that. So you'll see in the budget a 10% increase with sales tax. And again, that is based on actuals and what we're currently collecting, that's a even growth, if not a little bit less. Very conservative approach to that. What we have seen since the hurricane is a dip at the end of September, a very big dip in October, and then we've seen steady increases November, December, January, February, and March, compared to what we have typically within those months. That being said, all of those months, except for one, have had increases compared to last year. And last year was higher than it was the year before. That year was higher than the year before. So we've seen steady increases. Our sales tax is a little bit different in this town and in this county compared to where else you would look at across the state. If you look at the budget, $3.6 million is what's down as sales tax. However, when you go over to our central government, which we'll get to in a few moments, you'll see a big number there that looks like an expense for sales tax. It is. That's the money that we give back to Watauga County. So way back when, there was an agreement put together with the towns within Watauga County and Watauga County on a additional change or a change to the sales tax method. What used to be per capita, which for us is based on population, for everybody based on population, versus a switch, which ultimately went to ad valorem. That's an advantage for us. Our population, based on the census, is 1,300. We get a fraction of what the overall sales tax would be compared to Boone that has a population of 20,000 plus. But when we flipped to ad valorem, which they did a number of years ago, and that's where we still are today with them, it's a huge increase for us. It's an advantage for us because our tax base is what that's based on, that 1.7 billion. What most people don't realize, if you go to Boone's tax base right now, it's a little bit north of 2 billion, not a lot more than ours. A lot of their taxes and a lot of their property that's over there is not on their tax roll, it's exempt because of the college and et cetera. So when we flip from a per capita to ad valorem, is a huge advantage for us. Same with Beech Mountain, same with Seven Devils. That being said, there's a rebate, so to speak, that goes back to the county. So that 3.6 is not fully 3.6, it's 3.6, and then on the flip side, we've got the expenditure. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But again, overall, we are trending up within sales tax, and we have continued to trend up for a number of years. Yes, Ms. Perry.
This is not a budget question, I don't think, but as I'm walking up and down Main Street and talking to business owners, I don't know if you guys are hearing the same. I mean, they are really moaning the fact that their business is down. And so I'm trying to reconcile the sales tax numbers with what they're saying.
So sales tax in North Carolina is collected fully through the Department of Revenue. Once it hits the Department of Revenue, there's not a lot of detail that comes back out of the Department of Revenue, no matter what you do. There's been court cases, there's been lawsuits trying to get information out of it. So I will say this to say, when Watauga County sends their sales tax, it is for the entire county. So it may not be just Blowing Rock, it may not be Seven Devils. It is everything collected within Watauga County for each month gets sent to the state. That then gets sent back out and it's distributed based on one of those two percentages, whether it's ad valorem or per capita. So our sales tax numbers are really based on the county times this formula that's over here. That being said, retail is a piece of that. Your construction, your online, if it's applicable, construction is going to be one of the largest ones, within the county. A lot of things that have taken place, rebuilding, et cetera, since the hurricane. There's a lot of potential variables in that. So there may be businesses on Main Street that are having declining revenue this year over last year. Not sure, but the two aren't necessarily matched up, if that makes sense.
I got it.
Yeah. Questions? Again, the TDA. Okay, so when we look at the TDA revenue, one, we've got a little bit, it's kind of like sales tax. We've got a little bit more real data. We do have some things that we don't know, and tourism is one of those pieces. We rely on Tracy Brown, Director Brown from the TDA to really give us an indication of what he's seeing, what he's hearing across the state, across the area, across the region. One thing that we do know as we go in and trying to figure out the projecting or the forecasting is that our sales tax data typically mirrors the two. So if you don't have one going way down, one going way up. If they're not necessarily the same, but they're mirroring each other relatively, whether they're going up or going down. So sales tax data is positive, is what we've seen. So we feel like that's a good thing for the TDA. The TDA was on pace for a record year. Since COVID, we had one record year after one record year after one record year. And we were having another record year until Hurricane Helene struck on September the 27th. Up to that point, we were running about 10% ahead of where we were the year before. Then we lost the last week of September, and we lost at least the first 2 to 3 weeks in October. That being said, we have seen a leveling of the TDA revenue that has taken place since the hurricane. We missed what we feel like is 3 to 4 weeks of collections, big collections. October's a big month, typically in that 250,000 plus range for us. November was strong, December was strong, and then since January, we've seen a pretty consistent leveling of what we believe is happening within the tourism market and folks traveling. Our state is putting in $9 million. They've put in half of that already for advertising for West North Carolina since the hurricane, so that's a big important factor that we do feel like we're going to have some people that would not typically come here that would come, because this is not just reaching out in the state, it's reaching out in the Southeast, it's reaching out really across the entire country, but primarily focused on the Southeast and the Midwest, really trying to draw people into West North Carolina, utilizing the hurricane and obviously the news media that's been out there to say, come to West North Carolina. We had a chance, Pete and I had a chance to go and hear from the North Carolina visit director on some things that were going on from the hurricane and some of the ads, and they're really geared towards coming to West North Carolina, coming and helping West North Carolina. So I put that up there to say that's another, we feel like, positive thing for new visitors coming in or people that may have not come in. All that being said, that's kind of a roller coaster approach. We were on the record pace, we stopped, we went back up, we've seen a leveling. We know we've got a lot of money being spent on regional and Southeast, United States advertising. So the TDA decided to do nothing. Flat budget. What they had last year, they're going to do this year. We knew we were heading past that 1.8 million. We were probably heading to the 2 million plus range. We will end up this year about 1.7 and some change. We're not going to make 1.8 more than likely, but we're not going to be too far off of 1.8. That being said, the TDA board voted, or will vote. They've had their workshop as well. They meet next week. They will vote more than likely to keep their budget flat at 1.8 million. So that's what we've proposed as well. We take their budget and we roll it into our budget with 2/3, 1/3. That 2/3, 1/3 is important to us for a lot of different reasons. And we'll go through some of the things that they spend their money on, or what we spend their money on, not their money. Their money, but we spend it on our side. Overall, the TDA, you can see, is flat here at 2.4 compared to where it was last year at 2.4, and then the year before at 2.3. I said 1.8. Now I'm saying 2.4, right? So the $600,000 difference. This is where we get back into that central government sales tax weirdness that's over there. We do the same on the TDA. A number of years ago, the state said, you got to change how you do it. Not the state, sorry. General said, accounting practices said, you got to change how you do this. So the TDA collects 1.8 million. We actually collect that for them. We keep 600,000. We give them the rest. We have to gross it up. So the 2.4 is the 1.8 plus the 6. The 6 comes to us. Does that make any sense to everybody? So put your 1.8, it is 1.8 in actual money. However, we have to gross it up to 2.4 because we keep the 600,000. The 600,000 we spend on these things. This past year, we have spent that 600,000, or the 1/3 of the overall budget, for things like 321 landscaping, park attendance, Christmas decorations, street lights, sidewalks, parking decks, the new bathrooms out here, the new playground a few years ago, and some money going towards the new park. Anything we can justify as being tourism related, we try to utilize that $600,000. That $600,000 was half that just a few years ago, right after COVID, $346,000. If you go before COVID, it was in the 2s and in the 1s, and at one point, the TDA budget wasn't even $600,000. It was a fraction of that. So I say all of this to say, tourism is our economy. I mentioned that earlier with the diversification of the revenue. As tourism goes, we truly go from a budgetary standard. That number up there, $600,000, represents a good chunk of what we're able to spend and utilize for things like what you see down here that we typically wouldn't. It's what makes our town the town it is, the beautiful town with the flowers, the landscaping, etc. here. But TDA overall, flat is what I proposed. Pete, I should have recognized you. You're on the TDA board, so I should have asked if you had something you wanted to add to it.
No, I was just thinking that we owe our elected officials a big thank you for getting the postponement on the paving job on the parkway, because that would have been a major disaster. And so thank you to all of them that, I guess it was Senator Bud that met with the Park Service to push that aside.
Yeah, good time to stop for a moment there because it is tourism and TDA related. We put out the announcement last week, but Park Service, or National Park Service, Blue Ridge Parkway, has formally decided to put off their deferred maintenance project that they had scheduled to start in June and run through the fall. That was going to be a significant negative factor towards the tourism around here because it was going to be complete lane closures. There was going to be sections of the parkway closed. Sections that just reopened after the hurricane were going to reclose. That being said, a number of folks did meet with the Park Service and got a little bit more information about where this money came from a number of years ago through the federal government. And there's a time limit for them to spend it. And I think they're eager, and rightly so, to get this work completed. And so the work that was scheduled to start next month was really planned a year or two ago. And so they were just kind of following that schedule and worried truly about that money potentially going away, which I believe is about $200 million that was going to be utilized for that. Senator Bud and a number of folks on the federal side have assured them that money's going to be there. If they put the work off till next year, they've agreed to do so. So yes, not sure of the true impact. We do know the Parkway last year, 469 miles of it, had 17 million, I think, visitors and several $1 billion worth of economic impact coming off that parkway. So if we were to have full closures of our section, which is where it was going to be, I didn't mention that. It was really from the Blowing Rock section towards Linville was going to be the section that was going to be closed down. That's your Cone and your Price Park and your Cone Estates and all your trails. And, you know, what really drives our piece of the parkway from an economic standpoint was going to be closed. So yes, to Pete's point, very, very much, you know, thank you to the federal folks, local folks as well, for all the work that was put into convincing the Parkway to hold that off just for now. Yes, sir.
Okay, what is the status of our wayfinding signs that TDA was putting together, Shane?
Good update. So we pushed pause on that after the DOT made us aware that there were some issues with some of the design of the signage along with some of the placement or destinations with it. That being said, the city of Lenore is also going through wayfinding and they're starting to kind of fight that fight, so to speak, and DOT's lessening up some things. And so we are ready to move forward with a new design. Kevin, would you speak a few moments? You're a little bit more close to this than I am about where we are with the wayfinding sign.
Yeah, we are behind a little bit, but that had a lot to do with DOT not approving the design for the vehicular signage that's going to be out in 2021. But we've gone back with Destination by Design, who's doing the design work, and the contractor, Lightlight Signs out of Charlotte. We've done a redesign, and we'll present something to you maybe in the next maybe packet of information for the council meeting. Just the design has changed a little bit. Actually, it's actually a little simpler, but it was something that would meet the criteria that DOT had regulated. So, and trying to keep with the theme of the signs that are already in the county, so that they are starting production now. We've signed an addendum to the original contract, and so they're starting that work. And then also the pedestrian signs for around here, parking signs, and some of that wayfinding segment is underway.
So the TDA is actually, they're paying for the wayfinding signs.
Yes, correct.
Pedestrian, vehicular.
Correct.
So this is coming out of the TDA budget, not per se property taxes or anything like that.
Not one bit. No, not one bit. This is 100% paid for by the TDA. That's correct. And that's typical. I mean, it's a typical thing that Boone, Watauga, and others did. But that's on top of what we're putting up here as well. To the point I think you're trying to make. Pretty significant investment going into new wayfinding signing, pedestrian signage, et cetera. That's going to TDA is 100% funding that. That's not town monies. That's TDA monies. Not taxpayer money, but tourist money. Questions? Okay, so one thing we didn't talk about on the 13th, we'll talk about tonight or today. We have a number of fees that we charge. So we're talking about revenues, property taxes, sales tax, TDA. a number of fees from our planning and zonings, park and rec, public works, cemetery, etc. We are proposing only a couple changes, and these are going to be in the back of the book that you have, and they are in red. We typically put them in red. So when we look through on the planning and zoning side, we made a number of changes last year and even a number of changes the year before on increasing some of our permit fees on the planning and zoning side. We only have one proposal on the planning and zoning side, and that's for review of final construction plans. Typically, that's been $200. Kevin, Rob Rock, our planning director, is proposing $500 for that. And Kevin, I believe that puts us in line with Boone and others. Is that correct? Yeah, so that was one that may have just gotten overlooked last year. Again, if you go back to attachment A here, it says at the bottom, changes in red. There's only one on the first page. Planning and zoning, there's one. So the only proposed changes that we're looking to make, yeah. Right there. Yeah, right there. So one change, review of final construction plans, $200 to $500. That puts us in line like we tried to do last year and the year before with our neighboring folks, Boone, Lenore, et cetera. So that's the only proposed change. That is just when we have construction plans that are coming in, just that final review process. The other thing that is a little bit out of our control, really it's a lot of our control, is our recycling. So we contract with Republic to do our recycling. They come every other Thursday and pick up our recycling. Their charges to us, which we then pass on to our citizens, are changing from $10 every 2 months or $5 a month to $6 a month or $12 every 2 months. And that will be on your water and sewer bill. But again, that's just from us. We pay the bill, but we pass it on to the consumer, we collect the revenue, and we obviously pay ourselves back within that. So we do not make money off recycling. That money obviously goes to Republic to do that service, for us. I will say, if anybody had issues with the recycling last week, we had a new driver and new staff. So we did have a number of folks that did call and say they had missed the recycling, so we apologize. The gentleman that was doing our recycling, which was fantastic, who was also going to school, graduated. So he's moving on in his career. He was actually going to school full-time and driving the recycling truck full-time as well. So great for him for finishing school and graduating with a 4-year degree. He's now moved on, we've got a new driver. They're going to have a little bit of a growing pain there, is learning the routes, et cetera. So if anybody has issues, call us here at Town Hall. We'll make sure we come out and get your recycling. So maybe not a good time to up the increases or change the fees. That being said, Republic every few years comes back and revisits the cost of recycling. They're going to charge us $12 every 2 months or $6 a month. That does change it. So that is on page, I believe, 4. Right here in the red, curbside recycling, 5 to 6, 10 to 12. We are proposing no park and rec changes within fees, no cemetery fee changes, and then no other fees as a whole. Yes, sir, Mayor.
If I may, Ms. Brown, Jennifer.
Yes.
You have a warm and fuzzy with the no fee changes. That's being for Parks and Rec, your rental fees and things of that nature. Are you okay with those as they are?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then the cemetery expansion, what's the status of that? Any fee changes?
No fee changes. We have not voted on an expansion. We've talked about different things over the years. We are really to the point now where the cemetery is pretty full. I mean, we're basically sold out. We're going to have to make some decisions whether or not we're going to just end it or whether or not we're going to look at alternative methods. We talked about it 2 retreats ago, winter retreat, and we can put it on the summer retreat as well, but really that doesn't mean typical burial plots. We're talking probably above the ground options there that we would either need to contract or put out proposals or turn over to an outside industry or outside company for that. But the burial plots themselves, I think we're down to 1. We have 1 plot left.
You have 1 plot?
So that being said, anybody in the public, that needs a burial plot, just 1, not 2. So look for a solo. Yeah.
You can put a lot of cremains in there.
I thought about condos.
I do have on summer retreat for a discussion. Do we want to just let it be, or do we want to look at something different? But
There's only 1 plot left?
1 plot left.
We've sold a lot in the last 2 years.
But no other fees, proposed changes for fees outside of the 2 that were mentioned. on the general fund side. We'll talk about water and sewer in a few moments, but recycling, that's Republic. Proposed change on the planning and zoning side for final review of construction plans. That was just overlooked last year before we made some changes on the planning and zoning side. Overall, no other changes are being proposed within the general fund. Other revenue. So instead of just flipping through, most of our revenues that we're going to discuss are really all on the same page. So if you want to open up your book, and those that have it along at home, before we get too far into it, about 6 pages or 5 pages in, we have our revenue summary. Looks like this, general fund revenue summary. So it looks like this. It's got everything, starts with current year taxes, prior year taxes, these are property taxes, and goes down through. Not a lot of changes to these. There's a few, and I did point out a few things. Our utility franchise tax, that is from the state. We have moved that from $350,000 last year to $385,000. We are going to collect about $390,000 this year. So again, $385,000 puts us in line with what we're already collecting. So a lot of these are being increased or changing because of actuals. We don't like to speculate, don't like to make a lot of assumptions, but when we know things are coming in, and we don't see a reason for them to change, especially if we have multiple years of changes on actuals, then we feel pretty confident in making these proposals. Utility franchise tax is one of those. $350,000 last year, $385,000. Again, we're on pace for about $390,000 this year, so we feel pretty comfortable with that. Utility franchise tax comes to the state just like the POW bill does. POW bill made some systematic changes the state legislators did this past year. What we typically have had in the past is about $85,000. We will collect a little bit north of $100,000 this year, maybe $102,000, $103,000. So that's the reason for the increase on POW bill. So both of those are state revenues. Both of those are going to be equal to or actual this year as well, between the franchise tax and POW bill. As you scroll down, you'll see recycling fees are increased. Again, that's another one of those, because of Republic's going up on their side for what they cost us, we then charge more. So we are accurately showing what that increase is going to be from that $5 to $6 or $10 to $12 on recycling fees. Interest income. We have exceeded the $80,000 that we proposed last year. We are already north of $100,000, about $105,000, with May and June to come. So we feel confident that we'll be in that 115 to 120 range. Therefore, not knowing what's going to happen and not projecting any major decreases across the interest rate market, we've moved that to $100,000. Again, we should be in that 115 to 120 range. So we're backing that back down a little bit, trying to be a little conservative, but also not wanting to leave money on the table, to the taxpayers, et cetera. Park and rec fees, after school continues to grow. How many numbers in after school do we have now, Jeff? 38 kids are now in after school. We started it and we had 15. So you'll see increases in the after school fees that are in there. Same with the academy. We're now up to 12. We started with 6?
Yes.
We're at 12, and I put more on the way. Can't divulge what that means, but we have some folks that are expecting. So that's a good thing.
We can read behind the lines.
Nobody knew.
Congratulations, Shane.
Nobody knew. I just married one off. Yes, yeah, we just went through that. So when I have kids, so you'll see increases in park and rec fees, also increases in academy fees, and then our management fee. What that is, and that's a little bit, again, there's a lot of these things that I like to explain because it's a little unique. At the very bottom of this page, you'll see management allocation to utility fund. Water and sewer fund, general fund, 2 separate funds. We're not allowed to take money from one to the other. That's not allowed in North Carolina. So your water and sewer fund has to stand over here on its own based on its fees, and your general fund has to stand over here on its own. 2 can't swap money. What you can do is allocate the actual cost that it takes to run one or the other. So for us, all of our salaries of our administration, myself, finance director, HR, all that's over here on the general fund side. So we need to be able to account for some of that on the water side. Essentially, the water side owes us money on the general fund side. So there's a formula that the state puts together that we push in or put in our salaries and our benefits, and there's percentages. So for my time, there's 15% of my time that gets charged over here off the water and sewer side. Finance, 15%. And that's a very common thing. Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Presnell, others that are charged on the streets, which is general fund, their time's 50% on the water and sewer side because they spend a lot of time. Sometimes it may be more than 50%. But anyway, the number that you have there at the bottom, which this year is $287,000, last year was $266,000. The reason for the increase is as our salaries and our benefits primarily go up, which we'll talk about that in a few moments, then that number goes up. That makes sense. But the management fee that you see revenue on the general fund side, the 287 number, that's actually money that the water fund pays the general fund for all of our central government or administration or whatever you want to call us, our time that we spend on the water side. Does that make sense? These are the primary differences of what we have with other revenue. Any questions or any more details you want to go through within the other or within the general fund revenues? Okay. If you come up with something, obviously we come back. This is your workshop, so I don't want to go too fast within that. Any other questions on revenues as a whole on the general fund side? So we went through property taxes, we went through sales tax, we went through TDA, we went through others.
What's the park lease? Park lease.
Leasing, so the gazebo and different portions of the park. I mean, it's rental revenue that we get. The Vant
Oh,
Field.
got it,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the Vant Field, the gazebo, Rorton, the gazebo that's over there.
Okay.
That's what it is. Any other questions? Okay, moving along to the expenditures. All right, so put this up. I always like putting up the dollar because I think it helps everybody understand how we spend our dollar. Public safety is going to be number one in every town that has a full service town. I think it's important to stop for a few moments and say, we at the town of Blowing Rock are the unicorn in the state. We know that. Some of us like to say that, but we're this unicorn that's out there. We truly are, and I'll tell you why from my perspective. Nothing that we use, whether it's at the federal level or the state level, matches up with what really happens here. So you go to the federal level, the census, they say you have 1,300 people that live here. So they put us in a category with people with 1,300, other towns, other cities across this country. Over here, 1,300 people. That being said, we know we have 2,500 water accounts and sewer accounts and almost 3,000 homes that are here. So we know that 1,300 number isn't correct. But that's the first weirdness that we have. Then you flip into the fact that we, on the town's perspective, are a full service town, as in there is not another 1,300 person town that's out there, or even really a 2,500 water account town that has a water plant and a wastewater plant, a water reservoir that we provide ourselves with, our own streets and sanitation department, snow pushing and maintenance of each one of those streets, park and recreation, landscaping, police, fire, planning, zoning, administration, everything in between, all the folks that are represented up here, we have services that we offer. We offer every service that the city of Lenore or the city of Hickory or the city of Charlotte, for the most part, offers. We are a full service town. So when I go through these expenditures, we're talking about a lot of these cities that you'll see as comparisons are really, truly comparisons. Most people don't realize that the town of Boone, again, I talked about their value, is very similar for what they offer in their budget to what we offer here. Same with City of Lenore. There's not a lot of difference here. There's a few million, maybe in the budget, maybe a few things here and there are a little bit different, but we are a true full service town, and these department heads up here represent that. Highlands is not. No fire department, no streets. West Jefferson is not. Some of the places that sometimes we get compared to are not full service towns. They are much different, much smaller than what we are. When we look at full service towns, this is a very typical thing. Public safety is always going to be number one. It's police and fire. It's where most of your personnel are. It's where most of the costs are. That's a very typical thing. Central government is the weird one for us. When you look at our budget, when you flip open central government, which is, if you're on the revenue slide, flip on a few past administration until you get the one called central government. And it's 4.8 million. That's a big number. It's really made up of two things primarily. TDA is 1.8 million of that. Remember that number a few moments ago we talked about. Number two is our sales tax refund, 1.7 million. So $3.5 million are two things that either are just on paper, which is what the sales, or the TDA is, or the sales tax, which means we collect it and we turn around and give it back to the county. So of that 4.8 million, 3.5 is made up of those two numbers. That's why central government makes up 29% of our overall budget. Streets and sanitation, 14%. General, that is administration, finance, etc. Town hall, except for planning, is only 11%. Park and rec, 7%. Landscaping, 6%. Planning and inspections, 3%. That's how we spend a dollar, and that's a very typical way for full-service towns to spend a dollar. When you look at breaking it down even a step further, not only in the function of how we spend our money, but where do we spend the majority of our money? Salaries and benefits combined, I know they're separate here, and I'll tell you why in a few moments. But we look at them obviously combined, 48%. Operating costs, 38%. Debt service, 11%. Capital outlay, 3%. We're going to talk about each one of these in just a few moments because this is really the 4 categories that we look at when we're talking about general fund. So operating costs we'll go through first, salaries and benefits second, capital outlay and debt service will be third and fourth. This pie chart will come back in a few moments and I'll talk about how others look and what this looks like in other places. All right, operating expenditure trends. Our operating expenditures we just talked about a few moments ago. From a percentage standpoint, actual numbers right at $6 million. That is up from last year, roughly 5.7. $277,000 increase. Primary reason for that, sales tax up $155,000. Again, that's that central government piece. TDA didn't change, 1.8, 1.8. Sales tax, as the sales tax revenue goes up, our refund goes up. That refund going up difference is $155,000 of that $277,000. Legal, audit, and IT are up $73,000. Again, just in a few moments, I'll flip up a slide that shows a little more detail of what makes up that $277,000. Here's operating costs, 5.3, 5.68, 5.9, 5.7 in the last 3 years. We can flip through, but I can save you a little bit of time because some of these don't really have a lot of changes. Governing body is up slightly, $2,000. We've added the $2,000 for continued education. Our cost of the league continues to go up, and you all would like to participate, which is fantastic. We just came back from Greenville, which we, I think, all benefited from in a lot of different ways, but the cost of those conferences go up. So we've increased that $2,000. That's the only difference within the operating piece of the governing body. On the administrative side, which is, again, planning, or not planning, and everything except for planning and zoning within town hall. So that's finance, administration, all the folks up front here. Slight decrease overall in operating, and that was because we ended up reducing our materials and supplies down just a little bit. I think we reduced them about $2,000. Why do we do that? Because we're not spending it. We see it, so we're using those actuals. So when we first start the budget process, the first thing that we do, and I didn't mention this earlier, is we look back at not only where we are currently within the year and we project out, we look back what have we actually spent. If we ask for $10,000, but we only spent $8 consistently, let's maybe take it to $8 or $8,500. One thing that we did with the admin is we brought materials and supplies down to $7,000. Again, just talking operating, not talking salaries and benefits, just operating. Central government, that's our catch-all, that's that 4.8 million. It's up in several different areas. Legal services, we put $12,000 last year. We're going to spend more than $12,000. We've already spent more than $12,000. Next year, we projected that at $30,000. A couple of reasons for that. One, we have a new attorney. Our prior attorney did not change his rate from the time I think he was hired in 1980 something. Truly, I cannot remember what our last, Tasha's not here, I think our last hourly rate for him was $60 or $70 an hour. True story. Jody Peter, our new attorney, charges more than that, and he should. That's one reason for the increase, is that we're not paying, Alan Mosley or Tucker what we were paying them in 1988. So we've actually got with the times, and we're paying them what we should. Also, we're just busier. We're buying land, we're doing different things. We want to put $30,000 in there. We hope that's a good number. Again, $12,000 is not going to cut it. We're going to be in the 20s this year, so 30 is what we've put on there. Excuse me. Audit services. That's our financial audit. That's our financial audit firm, which is Thompson Price. Increasing from 29 to 36. The reason for that is the hurricane. So one of the benefits that we're very appreciative of is the work that FEMA is doing with regards to reimbursing us. However, that puts us into a whole new single audit category because we are now surpassing the $1 million, 750, whichever criteria you want to look at it, single audit criteria, which means our auditors are going to have to come in and do significantly more work on the money that we're receiving. They were scheduled to go up a couple $1,000s this year, so it was going to be in that 31 range. The 36 is a good placeholder because they're not exactly sure until they get within every one in the state, West North Carolina, what that's going to look like. So there is an increase there. We're projecting about $4,500 to be able to offset that single audit. That's a big number. I will say, if you go back a few years ago, our prior audit firm almost overnight doubled their fees. That's the reason that we went out and received the bid that we did with Thompson Price. We were in the 20s forever, and then all of a sudden we received a new contract and we were in the 40s. So we were still less than we were going to be a few years ago with the prior audit firm. So we feel like we're still in a good place with the audit firm, not necessarily go out for bids yet. We feel like they're doing good work, and we feel like they're very responsive to the work that we need them to do. That being said, they're trying to put placeholders out there because they know West North Carolina has received and will receive a ton of money, and that's going to impact the work they have to do to be able to account for the money that's being flowed through here. And truth being known, they don't know, fully, and won't know for a while what all that work looks like because of the amount of money that's coming through here. IT used to be this standalone for a while. The department didn't make a lot of sense because we have one person, Mr. Steele, who's behind the camera right now. We moved them back over the operating piece to the central government. You'll see that as you're looking down line 5, 6, 7. You'll see telephones, IT licenses, and service contracts. You'll see the amounts that are in there. Doesn't make sense for us to have a department of one, so we want to move those back over. Again, help streamline Tasha and all the things that are going on in the accounting. Melissa knows that for the work she does. It doesn't make sense for us to just completely continue to silo. We're trying to bring some of these things back together. Former finance director had a different approach to that. Tasha has a much more collaborative consolidation approach. That being said, you'll see, and that's why I wanted to pause for a few moments, on the IT side, biggest change is materials and supplies on the IT, $86,000 last year, $120,000 this year. Biggest change is at the bottom there. If you look at the bottom of this sheet, $69,800. That's computer backup, support, cybersecurity, cloud backup, and our business disaster recovery and our dark web monitoring. Those costs continue to rise. That's the reality. We have a fantastic IT director. We have a fantastic contract with a backup provider. We, knock on wood, have not had any down days that I know of in a long time. And so the cost is essentially the cost, is what I'll say, for doing business here, especially with cybersecurity, dark web monitoring, etc. Ransomware, all the things you hear about, you see, there's realities that we spend a good amount of money to try to prohibit from happening.
So the cybersecurity training is taking place as we speak.
Yeah, so one thing that's not included in this, because it was included in the budget we're in now, is the $70,000 grant Thomas received, not only for new computers, but for cybersecurity training and all that. So that's internally. A lot of this cost is external. We're paying a third party to help monitor, watch over, alarm us with issues. That's where a lot of this cost is going in. Thomas's grant that he wrote and received, is paying for internal training, etc. Email practice on not clicking on attachments, these kinds of things is going on. That's where most of the stuff begins, is through emails and through, clicking an attachment or invoice, looks to be paid, it's not legit, and then they're in the system. So yeah, that's going on as well. It's an election year. I don't know if you know that or not for some of you, but it is an election year. So every other year, we have to pay for an election on our side, right? We pay a portion of what we have happening within the Blowing Rock Town Council election. That was 0 last year because you weren't up. This year you are. 4 of you are. $12,000 is a number there. So we'll see that within the central government piece as well. 0 last year, $12,000 this year. And that goes to the Board of Elections to pay for the election that takes place here in Blowing Rock for 4 of the 16.
So if we make a request to postpone that number 2 years,
There you go.
the federal government pays for it. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, there's some truth to that. Yeah. Now, we do have a portion that we still pay, but it's not as, may not be significant. And our sales tax and TDA expense again is recorded here. 3.5 of that $4.8 million is recorded here within the central government. Questions so far? Moving along. Public buildings is where we capture Edgewood, 1888, and our our public buildings maintenance, our painting, our roofs, our gutters, et cetera. A slight decrease, we do have a number of things in there, but last year was the big year that we ended up paying a good portion towards 1888 for some of the renovations that took place. That was in last year's budget. We don't have that in there this year, so there's a slight decrease overall in public buildings. That being said, we do continue with the same maintenance, painting, that type of thing that's still included within the public buildings. Again, just talking operating for a few moments as we're flipping through here. Police, slight increase. Biggest change there is that we went to FirstNet this year. If you recall, we went to FirstNet, which is AT&T. That's the public or first responder network that AT&T put out a number of years ago. We went to FirstNet in early September. The fire department had already moved to FirstNet. The police department moved to FirstNet in early September, middle of September. September 27th, Hurricane Helene hit, and FirstNet could not have been more important to have because it essentially became our communication piece, not only for the fire department, which had been utilizing it, but the police department and even Public Works, which you'll see in a few moments, who also had transitioned over to FirstNet. So that's an increase within the police department. I think that number is place on here, $17,000, a little bit more than $1,000 per month, about $1,400 a month, I think is what it is with the police department. Well worth it. If for nothing other than that one storm, it was well worth it. Some of you were at Station 1 and seeing those communications take place. That's the real main increase on the police side, other than Chief Kirk is asking for new carpet and some upgrades, paint, etc. within the police department. He asked for a new police department, so we didn't do that. So we went from about $5 million down to some new carpet and some paint. Yeah.
There you go.
So, and I think something else, maybe a new chair or two, right? I think, yeah.
It's updating the console and everything in this much.
Yeah, that's right. So there are some upgrades there. Again, about $5 million for a new police department versus, what we're asking for here, new carpet. In the police department, which is one of our largest budgets, it is our largest budget, one of the largest budgets operating wise. The only two major changes, again, this carpet, paint, chair, etc. within the dispatch area, and then our FirstNet. The FirstNet, we did go back, and we talked about this right before the hurricane, if you remember us making this transition. Those costs are now incorporated within the police department, and that's $17,000 a year. I would say well worth it. Any complaints so far on FirstNet?
No, just to give you guys an example of what happened. When the console and communications went down, I was able to run the entire dispatch center off of one mobile hotspot, which is crazy. And during the storm, we were using the push-to-talk radios. That was us, Public Works. I mean, that's how we were communicating.
Yeah, so in the midst of the hurricane, our system went down. We had some water coming in, some other issues, so we ended up losing our dispatch. I don't know if most people ever realize that. Some that were over at Station 1. Within minutes, you and our dispatchers were heading over to Station 1, Fire Station 1, Chief Graham, Station 1, and went into a room and set up our dispatch utilizing FirstNet, and were able to take calls. We were only down for how long do you think, timing-wise? 30 minutes or less?
Yeah, it was
Maybe
just from drive here to there.
So FirstNet has paid for itself, is what I'm going to say in many different ways. Very appreciative of the work that they've done. Okay, fire and planning and zoning, same as the prior year. There's two departments that are pretty consistent there. I do think Kevin went up $50 or $250 on something, but plan reviews, plan reviews on the engineering side. Very consistent departments there in operating. The fire side, if you recall, we pay for the personnel, they pay for a portion of them. The majority of all the other costs, not the majority, almost all the other costs, the fire district pays for. We pay for some operating costs at Station 1, some of the maintenance, landscaping, etc. That's the only piece within the fire side, outside of the personnel that's there. But no changes are proposed within either one of those budgets. We'll get to capital in a few moments because there is something there from the roof standpoint, but that's not within the operating budget. Streets increase, Mr. Blackburn can tell you material costs. We have seen nothing but increases for several years now with all things to do with material, grass being probably the most expensive. Any comments you want to make on what you're seeing from a material cost standpoint? Salt being one of them as well?
Yeah, salt typically is the largest one.
just shy of $140 a ton for salt now. I'm sure that'll surpass that this coming year. They tend to go up about $15 to $20 per ton every year. So we'll probably be around the $145 a ton range. We're averaging about 350 to 400 tons a year salt use. So that's a pretty big cost on the street side. And then asphalt obviously is fluctuates quite a bit. So that's a stab for when that's going to come in. We're assuming that's going to be around $95 to $100 a ton.
So again, increase here, not a huge increase, but an increase primarily for those two things. Street lights, that's Brimco. They have increased. They increased this past year. If you remember back in the fall, they increased their rates a little bit. I think there's about a $10,000 increase there if you look at what you had last year versus this year. That was really realized back before the hurricane. That's not hurricane driven. That's our 300 and some streetlights that we have in town that we pay for. That's what represents that cost, and some of our buildings as well. But about $10,000 increase there within these streetlights. They are captured within the streets department. Sanitation only changes their recycling cost. We talked about that earlier with Publix. That's that 5 to 6, 6 to 12, or 10 to 12. No changes, really major changes at all within Park and Rec. And the only changes in landscaping, our 321 contract with the state, we do have a CPI piece of that contract. I think that percentage was right at 3%. Does that sound right? Right at 3% last year to this year. That was the new contract that we signed the year before last. We went out for bid. So we had the first bid that was a 3-year contract. We then rebid it. Again, that is primarily paid for out of the TDA money. It's in the landscaping budget, but we are able to take TDA money to offset or supplant the majority of that. So again, that's a big number as you look at the landscaping side, but just keep in mind, we're trying not to utilize taxpayer money for that. We're trying to use the TDA and tourism side. That truly is, like the landscape department, a lot of what Corey does, other than being fantastic, is tourism driven. I mean, there's a lot of economic benefit from that. That's why we justify utilizing some of those monies, because it's a beautification piece of what we do here in the town. The other increase there is a $10,000 increase from mulch. One thing that Corey has been doing the last couple of years is not skipping years, but mulching every year. Mulch is one of those ways, it's like putting the lipstick on the pig, so we don't have a pig, right? We've got a beautiful town. And we add mulch to something, it makes a huge difference. And so we've talked about this, mulching everything every year, which is something we've not done in the past. I think it's well worth it for an extra $10,000. That gets us every town-driven landscaping controlled area mulched each year is what we've done now.
Which will also help us with not spraying chemicals as well to emissions.
Yeah, helping weed control, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Going back to Matt, Mr. Blackburn. In some of the other towns I've lived, they used brine instead of salt. Is there any cost advantage to using liquid?
No, we don't have the space to mix it or have tanks to store it. We would have to retrofit all of our trucks. I mean, at this point, the way we set up, what we're doing is probably the most cost effective.
It wouldn't be in place of salt here.
No, it would have to be.
When it's used here in this environment, it's generally pre-treatment. In addition to either slag or salt, so.
Because of the temperatures and because of the quantity of snow or sleet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about Piedmont
Yeah,
areas.
Piedmont areas.
Out of this climate, yeah. Brine is used as a pre-treatment here, but not often used in
I think
place.
DOT's gotten away from that. as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we've looked at, the most expensive part not only is the trucks to put it down, it's the holding tanks and things behind it. You're looking at a big number.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Questions on operating costs. We have 2 pages worth there, and we can stop and go through in more detail if you've got questions on anything. Does anybody have any questions? Move on to capital.
Take a 5-minute break.
Sure. Sounds like a plan.
started.
Guess we're good. Everybody's back? All right, so we, quick recap, kind of four pieces of the expenditure, operating being the first, capital being our second piece we're gonna talk about, then salaries and benefits, and then our debt piece. So, capital outlay, here is a chart that shows our capital spending trends the last 5 years. 417, 650, 534, 485, and 415. The very last piece of your budget book is the last 4 or 5 pages look like this. They start with some yellow highlighted pieces. And again, we put this budget, when we put the thing together and finalize it, we'll have page numbers and all that stuff. We were pushing a little bit on timing, but what you'll see in the back is starting with general capital equipment projects, and it starts with our police. And the next 4 pages or so after that just give an indication of what our planned replacement times are. So whether it's police trucks or public work trucks, or whether we're talking about heavy equipment, something until about 22 or 23 that we did not have is a plan necessarily. We knew that we always do 2 police cars, we always do certain things, but we were catching ourselves like in 23 with a big year. We had a big thing that took place that year, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but we may have had several things. We really need to try to keep this as even as the short-term loans for this. In the past, those loans have been advantageous because they've been in the 1% to 2% range. We'll see what this year's look like, but we try to keep this even because, again, this is not necessarily the full cost represented in 1 year, but if you think about it, if we do the same thing year after year, it's our rolling stock. And so this 415,000 represents a very steady approach to that. Our schedule in the back shows what we expect year after year after year, and you'll see this $400,000 to $500,000 number is what we're expecting in the next few years. That does not push us past anything or put us into a position in which we won't have things, so we're not pushing too far, but we also have the right, and we did again this year, push things off. Whether it's a trash truck or whether it's things that may have been up this year, there's other things that we've been able to do to push some of these things off and be more consistent, if that makes any sense. Our overall general fund fleet replacement and equipment replacement this year at $415,000 is made up of a couple things that are a little bit unique. First one being our finance software. Last year, we all voted to replace our financial software for the first time in 20 years. Year number 1 is behind us. Year number 2 is coming up. That's the $45,000. Overall, it was a $90,000 project, which is really, really good in software, especially in financial software for a budget and as complex of a system as we have. $90,000 for an upgrade is a good number, but 45 last year, 45 this year. Ms. Brown is well underway in the finance department and making that transition to the new software, and we'll have that completed in this upcoming fiscal year. That's why $45,000 is included. One police vehicle is in there at $85,000 plus the upfitting of a new one. If you remember back on the 13th of May, I talked about Nathan's folks have had a rough year with deers and things jumping out in front of them. And so we've been able to replace one new vehicle this year, as in I think right now, it's on order, that we were expecting to do next year because of insurance proceeds that have come in. That's been good and bad. So we've been able to replace some cars that we weren't expecting and some cars that we were expecting through the insurance proceeds that we've been able to accomplish. So instead of 2 this upcoming year, we've got 1 in there. That being said, we're not getting behind because we have 1 that has been ordered recently. Is that correct?
So it is an advantage if somebody hits deer.
Depends on what they hit them with. I will say this, we have seen, like all of us, used car prices have gone through the roof the last few years. So yeah, if we have a car that is already appreciated, we've already depreciated through our system, and it happens to hit a deer, we have found a couple of those have been, we've been reimbursed for more than what we thought we were going to.
So if we see him going across a farm field.
So this is mine. Sorry. It is, okay, sorry. We've been able to make two older cars that were totaled because of deers and other issues that we've had. We've been able to take the proceeds off those 2 to purchase the new one, is what we're essentially saying here, which means we have 1 that's upcoming. On the street side, we have replacement of a chipper truck, a dump truck, and a couple, I think, 2 additional snow plows for each one of those. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Along with cameras. We talked about this. These are dash cameras that we have been utilizing in the fire department for quite some time. I think you guys have been using it. Obviously, the police department has dash cams, webcams within the police department. We're doing this for a few different reasons. One being for insurance purposes. Having the dash cam, being able to see what's going on, also for our accountability of our own drivers, speeding and things of that nature. So these cameras will be able to record those things and for us to be able to have that data. Is that correct, Mr. Blackman? Cost of those were $13,000, does that sound right?
That sounds.
And that puts them in all vehicles. And that will put cameras, $14,000, that puts cameras in all of our streets, trucks, dump trucks, and all the things that are out there. That will allow us not only for some comfort in knowing that we have recordings potentially of something that goes on, but also hopefully keeps our folks a little bit more accountable out there driving, speed, etc. So those are included. And then on the landscape side, 2 minis for 1 is how I put it. Is that a good way to put it? We're looking to trade our 2 mini trucks in, which the first one, what's our age of those mini trucks? 80s?
So one's a 90 and one's a 92 or 3.
So they're older for not a new one, right, but a newer one. Newer. And we're also looking to get rid of, again, 2 minis for 1 new mini truck and then 1 golf cart and gator. You want to describe maybe your thoughts behind that, Corey?
Yeah, so obviously the 2 mini trucks we purchased for cheap just to see if they'd work. Obviously, it works really well for water. So we're gonna replace that with just 1. And then the golf cart also needed to replace, so the gator was a good option to get the golf cart and also have a backup because we have to have a water truck backup that can work. So the gator kind of works as a golf cart and a backup for watering. So that's kind of where we landed on all that. Swiss Army knife equipment is how we roll. It's got to have multiple purposes.
So the 415 is made up of 45 finance software second year, 85 with police vehicle, 213 with streets, and 60 for landscape. Questions? Okay, moving on to employee salaries and benefits. Overall, our total budget for salaries and benefits are right at $7.5 million. That's up from 6.9 last year and 6.44 the year before. We have several things that are included in this, and I've got a lot more slides on this because I think it needs to be shared, some of the details of what's going on here. 2.5% COLA is about $120,000 plus benefits on top of that. The 120 represents the actual COLA itself. Retirement health insurance increases $346,000. So again, wanting to make sure to stress a couple things. One is that our retirement system that we're all a part of here, the North Carolina State retirement system, our percentage changes each year. It is an ongoing changing number. It is given to us by the state of North Carolina through the pension plan each year prior to the budget to let us know what our upcoming year is from our from the employer contribution. So each one of our employees, each one of our payrolls, this week's payroll, 6% of their pay will go out of their check to the state system. It goes right to the state system. On the employer side, our percentage changes based on a number of things. One being the number of retirees we currently have in the system. Think of Social Security and how this works. 2, number of retirees that are coming, how many years they have left. And of course, each one of those are dictated by what's being paid out. And so the Social Security system and the state retirement system are very similar. So there's a lot of money sitting down there, and they're trying to keep as much as they can funded of what currently is being used and then what's coming in the way of retirements. And so our percentage in every town and every county has a different percentage based on those factors. Our piece of that is 21.7% this year. It was right at 16% last year. It's a 6% difference in just 1 year. Why? A couple different things. One, we've got some new retirees that have gone home this past year. Police chief and others. We've got a couple folks, some potentially in this room, that are getting close to retirement. Therefore, we're starting to pay for their retirement as it's coming up. So that number is not a number that we can dictate. Can't change it, can't do anything about it. Can't opt out, can't do anything. That's a mandatory number, almost 22%. of every dollar that we pay goes to this pension. So again, that's a number that we can't change. Health insurance, we did put a 5% increase, I mentioned earlier, because we don't know necessarily. We know that our state plan changed from Blue Cross to Aetna. We've had some issues with that. We also know the league has gotten out of the health insurance business. A lot of things going on in North Carolina from a local government, state employee perspective with health insurance. We're looking to get through this budget into the summer, and we will start evaluating what options are out there. We may end up going right back with Aetna come January the 1st, or we may end up bringing you all some different options within that. But to put a placeholder out there, we put 5%. That may not be enough, maybe too little, we don't know. You know, it depends on what we end up finding there. Overall, $7.491 million is what we spend. We are not proposing any new full-time positions. So what we currently have in 81, I think, full-time positions is what we're proposing next year. There is a schedule, as you're flipping towards the back before you get to the deck, that talks about our 81 positions and what that looks like.
So we are fully staffed.
And we are fully staffed. We do have some changes going on in a couple departments. However, we have individuals that are interested or individuals that have applied for those positions. The fully staffed piece we'll come back to in a few moments, because I want to share why that's important and then maybe some question marks on how we have gotten there. COLA 2.5% increase is what we're proposing. The state average is right at 3% this year. We typically do things on the 2.5%, 5%, 7.5%. We do 2.5%. So we propose 2.5%. Again, that insurance up 5% is what we projected. And then we know the state retirement's up right at 6%. So employee benefits, you know, are something that's discussed often, and we have great benefits here. I'll start by saying that. And I think those are important. I'll tell why in just a few moments. What we've always done is we try to provide at a very little cost, medical, dental, and vision at a very little cost for our employees. On average, our employees, not for family plans, our employees pay between $25 and $50 a month for health insurance, which is great. We pick up the rest of that, which is around $650 to $700. Our dental and vision, again, fraction of that cost. It depends on what plan you have. It may be as little as a few dollars up to $20 or $25. We do provide life insurance and short-term disability for our employees at no cost. Life insurance is based on salaries, so it's based on the money that their salary that you're making here. We provide that at a no cost. If we have an employee that passes away while they're working here, we do have a life insurance plan. A lot of our employees do not have life insurance plans, and a lot of times, like we have found in the past, unfortunately, when we've had employees pass away unexpectedly, sometimes that's the only money that they have outside of maybe the 401k. 401k is a big deal. We do provide a 5% match to 401k. Contrary to a lot of belief that's out there, a lot of our employees, when they leave here, that is the only money that they have because they've not been able to save, unfortunately, just given the cost of living, et cetera, here. So we do continue to provide 5% match regardless, or 5% contribution regardless of whether or not the employee provides a match to that. Civic time is something we put in place years ago, 16 hours or 2 days. We encourage our employees to go and volunteer, whether that's at their local school or their church or their community center or Helping Hunger or a lot of places. And I know you have some that come from us to you to help volunteer. That is something that we want to be able, and we try to encourage our employees to give back. If they're having to use their time, they may not do it. Time is money. We give them 16 hours a year. If they don't use it, it goes away. That's not something that's not worth anything per se. If they don't use it, it just goes away. Next year you get 16 more. So we do try to encourage employees, and we do share our philosophy of trying to get out at least a couple days a year and volunteer within there. We always have a Christmas party, and I think that's something that provides a great time for our employees. That is a benefit. A lot of places don't have, but we do, and we try to get together in fellowship and have a meal. And then our Blowing Rock Academy, which we'll talk about in just a few moments, continues to grow. We started with, we'll say 6, 7. Now we're up to 12, and we've got a couple more that I believe will be on the way in the next 12 months, utilizing that discount. That is a benefit. There is a cost to that that does have to play into. But we do continue to provide these benefits to our employees, and I think that's important. I'll show a little bit more in a few moments. Yes, sir.
Question for you, Shane. Okay, when you look at our competitive partners or our neighbors here, App State, Boone, Watauga County, how do we compare with employee benefits? Because keeping employees now is hard.
Extremely hard.
And so how do we compare with the others? Are we better, or do we have areas we need to improve, or what?
We are, our insurance piece is very similar. So across the board, a very similar approach, whether it's Town of Boone, Watauga County, Lenore, Hickory, et cetera. There may be a little variation of that top bullet point. It's very similar. So most places are providing health insurance at either no cost or very little cost. Same with dental, same with vision. Short-term disability is very typical. Life insurance hits and misses there within that. But again, our life insurance probably averages less than $20 an employee a month. It's not a huge number there, but it's another one of those benefits. But the top bullet point, I'm going to say if you go across the board, is 90+% similar to that. That's across there. The 401k hits and misses. The county doesn't have it, Town of Boone does. So it just depends on what where you are with what that looks like. We've had that for as long as I know. It's been a part of that. And I have seen many, many people, like I said earlier, that have retired here with that as being the only savings that they have to be able to move forward.
Has it always been at 5%?
It has been. It has been. I would say if you're guessing at things, that 5% is about 50-50 across the state. That's about, and 5% is a pretty common number there. You don't see much more than that. You don't see much, smaller than that. Civic time is something we added a few years ago because some of our counterparts were doing that. Town of Boone, Todd County. So we added that because others were doing that. And that's something that our employees had come to us and said, hey, here's some things that are going on, such and such as using their civic time to be able to go to school and volunteer, or churches, community centers, et cetera. So we did add that back a few years ago. And then the academy, we are still, the unicorn is just about there, but we are seeing signs of it expanding. And I've shared that with you all with my ability, my ask and opportunities to go and speak to some of the groups across the state and others that are doing that. I think the city of Raleigh may be on the verge of doing it next, is what I've been told. So that's a big piece to what we have to offer here. It may only be 12 children, but that represents over $1 million in our salaries and benefits, those 12 children. And some of these people up here are represented within that, and many others, from the back of our trash truck to our police chief sitting right here.
And you're saying that represents $1 million. That represents $1 million in
Employee salaries and benefits. That's correct.
Those employees we might not have otherwise, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So very similar top view. The bottom one's obviously the unique one, but it's a big one. It's a big unique one. All right, so talked about the function expenses and how we break it out, public safety and that type of thing. And then I showed you this and what this looks like, because I think it's important. It's kind of hard to put in comparisons. Until you put in comparisons, what does it typically look like? We talked about our diversification on our income and revenue side, and how we are a tourism-driven economy, and TDA and sales tax continues to prop, overall the budget up each year. Salaries and benefits make up 48%. And if you look at our budget and you flip towards the front of it, there's a slide or a page that shows that. So when you flip over past the taxes and all that good stuff, if we get to the taxes, you'll see our employee benefits pieces in there. Personnel, operating, capital, debt service. And this is everything. So what you see there is not only general fund, but also water and sewer. And so what that represents is 48% of our budget. So when you take operating costs and salaries and benefits, debt service, capital outlay, again, that's our big four. That's the four that we break things down into. So salaries and benefits represents 48% of our budget. Is that too high? Is that too little? Well, if you look at the data, and again, I'm looking at the surrounding areas. Beach Mountain, I will tell you, is a little bit less than us, but Beach Mountain's not a full-service town. Again, trying to look at full-service towns and what this looks like. Salaries and benefits as a percentage of the general fund budget, ours is 48%. With Wilkesboro's 51%, could not get Wilkesboro's, didn't have the data for it. Boone's 57%, Hickory's 60%, Lenore 74%. These are real numbers. You can go on their website, pull them off. You look at their budget, you go to the city of Lenore, 74% of their general fund goes to personnel, salaries and benefits. 48% looks pretty good compared to what 74 looks like, or 60, or 57. That includes the academy, that includes the 401k, that includes all of our salaries and benefits. And what that looks like. When you get into positions, and this is where back to the point of benefits and our culture and how we do things here. I think these people will tell you being fully staffed is a must. Having one position down is difficult. Having 3 or 4 or 5 is almost impossible. We have stayed relatively fully staffed without the police department's a little bit of a roller coaster here and there, but we're now past that. We have stayed relatively fully staffed the last couple of years.
So these are percentages of staffing.
So if you look at these positions, which is our upper positions, because I want to say why I put these up here. We have done a really, really good job on our entry level and our next level folks. We are very competitive. Here, though, we struggle compared to some of our neighbors. And here's some percentages of what that looks like. Boone Fire Chief, Nor Hickory positions. These are increases more than what we're paying. So, for instance, an example, if you want to go to Boone, the fire chief there makes 66% more than what does here, more. These are often, if not municipality numbers. These are real numbers.
Well, now with the police chief, you plug in new carpet.
Yeah, new carpet with the So we, and I will be bringing to you all some suggestions coming forward, not today, but as we need to try to stay competitive with this. Again, our lower level, next level, I think we're doing pretty good. I think our folks can tell you, Public Works and others can tell you that we're really competitive there. This is the area, our upper management, that we continue to be behind with our neighbors within that.
Saying in the future, I would like to see over a 2-year period, how we reach that level with our key people, how we reach that level and above, and what it takes.
Okay.
Okay?
Can do. I put this up here not to prove a point, but to prove a point at the same time. All these other things that we're talking about in here, these mean a lot to a lot of these people up here, and a lot of the people that are listening here. Our culture means a lot to a lot of people that are in here. We've got to get a hold of this. If not, then we're not going to have a lot of these people. Because these numbers get to the point where this position or that position or this position vacates one of these places.
So we don't pay,
and then we're competing.
we don't pay Parks and Rec anything?
We don't pay Park and Rec. Boone doesn't have a Park and Rec or IT director that's listed anywhere. Nor in Hickory within here. Again, I wanted just to put some things up there in perspective. Why it's important to keep what we're doing and focus on the future to make sure that we're staying competitive in that. Questions on salaries and benefits? All right, debt service. Another piece that a lot of times get maybe scrutinized a little bit because we're not able to compare apples to apples. This town is different. When you look at us compared to other 1,300 people town, we look like we have a lot of debt service. And we do compare to them. We're not like any other 1,300 person town. We're really not like any 10,000 person town in the state. And I'll tell you why in just a few moments. So first, let's go into debt service. Here is our total debt within the general fund. This is not what we owe each year. This is what we owe overall. And I put a couple years in here to show what we've been talking about. 2 years ago, 11 million, 10 million, 8.9, say 9. Next year, 7.4, 6.4. A big factor, we talked about this earlier. Back in 2014, voters approved GO bonds. 75% of this number, or 6.7 million, was voter approved. The rest, installment loans. Buxton Property and Fleet. We're seeing a nice downward trend here. This won't last because we've got things we want to do, right? So there's things that are going to be coming for you all soon that may change this. However, this is what you want to see, is you want to be able to see some of these plans, or some of these numbers starting to decrease so you can start backfilling as this debt's rolling off. Our total debt service has been relatively flat. Why is that with the number going down? Well, GO bonds are 20-year debt pieces. They are smoothed out over 20 years. So you don't see a lot of fluctuation within that. Our big fluctuation comes next year, not this year. This year's budget has 1.75 million in the general fund. Next year, as of right now, is 1.2 million. There's a $500,000 drop. That's a big drop for us. Two main pieces. Our Station 1 debt rolls off next year, and our Buxton property debt rolls off. We also have one installment loan that is smaller that will roll off as well. That being said, that's about $500,000 worth of debt that rolls off next year. We've got a plan for a little bit of that, some of which we've already approved and moved on. About half of that, $500,000. But next year's a big year for us, for the debt piece that rolls off. About $500,000 rolls off next year. That being said, we know that we have recently approved this park project. We've also recently approved the purchase of a couple pieces of land. Total $2.1 million for park and the 2 pieces of land. That's about $250,000 in debt service. We're going to be coming to you all in the next 2 to 3 months, once we go through the LGC and the debt council, which we'll talk about that in a few moments, and get approval. We'll be bringing you all, hopefully, a long list of banks that have, we've been able to solicit for the $2.1 million loan. I know we talked at the retreat about trying to package a number of things into that larger loan, and we had said things around $4.5 or $5 million. We talked about upcoming sidewalks that were needed to be repaired, upcoming street paving that needed to be done. That being said, we have discussed with the local government commission, which again, that keeps coming up, and I'll talk about why that's important, because that's a requirement. We've discussed with them packaging streets and sidewalks and land and parks together. Their issue with it is that we're not shovel ready on some of that. Our streets are not going to be happening until next year with some of the paving. Sidewalks aren't going to be happening until next year with some of that. They like to see things, and our new auditor and our new state treasurer, those like to see things shovel ready. We're shovel ready on the park and the land because we either already bought it or we already started it. So 2 months ago, you passed a reimbursement resolution, if you recall. That's key because anything that we spend now, once we receive the loan, we'll pay ourselves back and we'll make ourselves whole. We have changed our $4.5 to $5 million loan that includes the streets and the others to a 2.1. So that's new news to you that has recently just been made aware of us this past week after we discussed with the local government commission. They don't want to see the non-shovel ready pieces in there. They want to wait till next year. So as for right now, the next 60 to 90 days, you're going to be presented with, on our behalf, hopefully again, a long list of banks and their interest rates willing to put forward for proposal for $2.1 million. That also does include a new roof at the fire department. So we talked a few moments ago about the fire department operating cost and capital cost. We are going to refinance a portion of the fire department, like we discussed. Does that make sense? What we talked about at the retreat for $2.1 million. That will get us a lower rate. That will provide us security. The other option is a little bit more convoluted. It's trying to combine collateral that includes multiple pieces of property, like the park or the land that we just bought. That's going to make less banks interested. Fire Station 1 for collateral, $2.1 million, we will receive a number of proposed banks. But that is going to be coming on not 25, 26, but it will be coming on 26, 27. So that's important because that $500,000 is going to be represented in 26, 27. Am I keeping everybody? I lost you yet?
I did have a question from Doug.
Mhm.
He wanted to know, are we able to get vehicles in the current year ordered now?
Yeah, so our police vehicles are the ones that are the hardest to get. I think you're talking about maybe the timing of ordering those and how long it takes to get them. What are you expecting with the vehicle that was just ordered? They give you an estimation on the timeline for delivery?
Typically, Dodge has been about a month and a half turnaround. They're extremely fast compared to most.
That's not bad.
And the reason, one of the reasons I talked to Shane about this, getting this one ordered, technically this budget year, the end of this fiscal year, is because Dodge was running a deal and we got $2,500 off. So it's $2,500 cheaper than the car I ordered at the beginning of the year because of the hurricane. So they're helping the western counties replace vehicles and do that. So I don't know what it's gonna be next year. They haven't released the prices yet, but I've heard from Ford and Dodge that those prices will go up just because of the market and things like that. So we got to deal with this one that we just
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, most of our other vehicles and fleet is pretty timely. We don't have much of an issue like we did during COVID and with the chip shortages and some of the things that are going on there. I don't think Matt's had any issues recently with anything, but the current year vehicle that's in there that's being paid for essentially with insurance money is the only one that we would have ordered or should have ordered this year. Everything else was already ordered prior, back in the fall for the last year's budget within that. So debt, does that make sense? We go back just to make sure that what I'm kind of sharing. So the only new debt that we will have in this current budget is our installment piece, which is for our fleet. Everything else will be in the next year's budget, which is 26, 27. Even though we're going to be bringing you all a loan proposal probably in August or September, we don't really start payments for about a year typically after that. Now, some banks are different, but most banks, especially we're talking about a 10-year loan, we may sign the document in September, our first payment's due the next in September typically. There may be a down payment piece within that, but we're a little different than you would be if you went and bought a car or bought a house. You would expect to make that payment the next month. We usually just make one payment, annual payments typically is what we make within that. So the only thing you're going to see is that one installment debt piece, which is for our vehicles. Everything else is going to be coming up in 26, 27. Then we really start looking forward to maybe November of 26, maybe it's November of 27, as another potential bond, and that would be for paving and sidewalks and the things that we talked about during the retreat. We've kind of pushed that off for now. What we haven't pushed off is the two things that we talked about that were more acute. We talked about our streets and our sidewalks. I think there was about $750,000 in sidewalks and about $750,000 in streets that Doug Chapman shared with us. We are not ready to start on those quite yet. And quite honestly, we don't need to with the hurricane and all the pent-up demand that's happened because of that with asphalt and concrete. We just need to wait and really try to tackle that maybe spring to summer of next year once we kind of see how the market is. What we do have in the budget is not represented here because it goes back to 2014, is we do have monies left over from the original bond. As we were able to spread out the issuance of that, we were able to earn interest on the monies that were sitting there. That interest monies will pay for the crosswalks that we had talked about. So we will not have to borrow money for the crosswalks. But again, I think we had decided on the crosswalks to push pause until spring of next year because of construction and all the things that we've had going on.
Well, of course, crosswalks can't be done or should not be done until the paving's
Can't be done until the paving's done. So crosswalks, not going to borrow for, just keep that in the back of your mind. We've got interest money sitting there from the bonds that we've been able to accumulate the last 11 years that we're able to pay. We'll be able to pay for those crosswalks. So the two pieces not included in that 2.1 really are the acute needs on the streets and the sidewalks, in which we will revisit after the winter, once we have a little bit better understanding. I'm not so sure that we can even get the work done now if we try, with just the amount of demand that's out there with asphalt and concrete that's going on. So, thought I'd add this because we talked about it, and I think Mr. Harwood had this question. He sent me a couple questions about debt service. How much is too much debt service? How do we compare to others? I think he asked the question Tuesday night, 2 weeks ago, and then he followed up within that. So, like a lot of things that we are able to attain, either the league or the School of Government or the Local Government Commission puts out data for us. And so we talked earlier about salaries and benefits. That's coming from league data. League puts out a salary study. This information is coming out through data that the Local Government Commission puts out. So North Carolina has a Local Government Commission. We're one of a handful of states that has this entity. And they are Big Brother, or whatever you want to call them, but they watch over everything we do. The financial audit that we have done each year goes to them for approval. If we want to go and receive a new loan or debt, we've got to go for them to get approval. So they are a key piece in what we do. So they have this data. So
Are you leading up to what, as individuals, when you buy a home, we're calling it the debt-to-income ratio?
Yes, very simple. A lot of things on this slide. Debt service, too much, question mark. There's a lot of ways to look at debt service. If you look at our audit, and this is a real number, people may not believe it. Our audit's on the website. This one doesn't have page numbers on it. Because I don't think some folks understand. The first step in understanding how much money can the town borrow legally. Now, this doesn't mean we would borrow this much, but page 56 of the audit at the top, this is from our auditors. They calculate how much money can we legally borrow. That's a real number. $133 million is what we can legally borrow based on the United States government accounting standards, how they represent it. we're never gonna borrow $133 million. You saw a few minutes ago, our numbers were in the 9s and the 10s, right? So 133 is a big number. So that number is a number that's unrealistic, but it's a real number. It's in the audit. That's what that number's there for. The second piece is the LGC and the debt council. That's really where we are kind of governed. As we approach any debt issuance, the 2.1 million that we just talked about, we physically have to go to Raleigh, and we have to take this audit, and we have to take this budget, and they ask us a whole series of questions about what we're going to do, why we're going to borrow it, and then they really crunch the numbers to see whether or not they think we should borrow the money based on our tax rate, based on our sales tax, based on our TDA. There is a debt council that has been put together by the LGC years ago, and that debt council includes Lieutenant Governor, it includes our state auditor, our state treasurer, and a number of folks within the government, local government commission from staff. So that's another kind of threshold is, we're talking about, do we have too much debt? Well, they're never going to let a town get too much debt, or a city or a county, because you've got to go through them, and they're utilizing all of their data and all the information they have. The thing that also I think needs to be pointed out is the town is going to be here forever. Key piece that came up and comes up all the time is that we should be debt free, or we should not go into debt for things. That necessarily isn't the case, because unlike us, myself and all of us up here, we would love to be debt free one day, hopefully before we die. Like, we want to be debt free and retire and then die. But we would like for that period to be a long period in between that.
1 out of 3.
Yeah. We'd like to have a big period of time and we're debt free and retire. The town's never going to retire, and the town's never going to die. The town's going to be here. So in order to keep our taxes low and keep other things low and consistent, we like to smooth things out. They used to say in the auditing world, never say smooth things out, because that's it's a fraud mechanism. We like to smooth things out. We like to keep things smooth. So we don't want to go and just take $2.1 million out of our checking account and pay for the park and pay for this land. We want to receive debt for that, to smooth it out over 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So we're able to keep our debt low. Why do we do that? One, we receive extremely advantageous rates. The majority of our debt, and I know today is different than it was even a couple of years ago, but you look through our audit, it will tell you every bit of anything you ever need to know about our loans, and you will see numbers in here on page 55 and page 56, 1.19%, 1.27%. 2.9%. These are good rates. We earn about 5% on average on the idle cash we have. So pretty much anything under 5%, we're earning maybe more on the flip side than we are borrowing. So those are the key points in that. Another thing, my last point on this debt piece before we get into some real numbers and kind of how we compare to what the mayor was talking about. We have done a ton in the last 6 years. I put 6 years because that's when I started. I don't know what all was done necessarily, but there was a lot done before I was here as well. 10 million streets and sidewalks plus have been done. 3 million in park and rec, new park, new bathroom, new playground, project that's going on. We've purchased over $2 million for land, whether that's for future expansion, infrastructure needs, water, communications, etc. And 10 million plus in the water and sewer side. That includes USDA, which we're working on now. That does not include Main Street, because Main Street wasn't a piece of debt. Main Street was $5 million. $25 million worth of stuff done in the last 6 years. Some of you running can use this, just FYI, on what's going on. $25 million worth of progress that has been accomplished. And our debt has been consistent throughout that time, because we try to smooth it out as much as we can. So again, is it too much debt? See, these are some of the factors that I think are important in looking at what that looks like. But to the mayor's point, let's get into real numbers. First, everybody's got a credit score. All of us know what a credit score is. Our credit score, we'll use S&P for example, because it's the one that most people use in North Carolina. Our credit score is right here. It's a AA+. That is the highest credit score that we can get. S&P has a chart here. And you say, wait a minute, they've got a AAA up here. We're right here on number 2. AAA is up here called prime, and AAA is based on the amount of debt as well. Typically, 100 million plus gets you in that AAA category. We're never going to be a AAA because we're never going to have $100 million of debt. We are literally the highest. S&P went through their bond re-rating last year, some of y'all recall. I had to go through several interviews along with our finance director and go through this whole re-rating process. We are literally ranked or rated the highest as we can. How do we compare? We compare with Hickory, Mooresville. We're better than Monroe and Hillsborough. Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro. That's your triple A's because they've got billions of dollars worth of debt. There are 2 towns in North Carolina under 10,000 in population that have double A plus. Us and Riverbend. Don't know why Riverbend. Us and Riverbend. Only 2 towns under 10,000 in population. I can share the data with you. It's on the LGC website. So we have the highest credit rating that we possibly can have. That's step one with debt, right? Having this rating system being the highest. Then, to the mayor's point, we don't have this debt to income or equity kind of thing because it depends on how you want to break that down. Here's how the LGC breaks it down. They say, well, how much debt as a percentage of your appraised value? 0.55. That's not 55%. That's 0.55 of 1%. Hickory 45, Nags Head 53, Bald Head 13, Beach Mountain 19, Cary, Charlotte, Raleigh. Why did I pick these up here? Because not everybody's ranked in that system. So you have to have geo bonds. You have to be able to have the S&P process performed to get a bond rating. So I did not put others in here. Boone doesn't have a rating. They don't. Beach Mountain does. Bald Head does. So these are why I use these comparisons in there to say, again, this is another way to look at it. Not only are the points, I tried to make of what progress has been made and the smoothing out, but also trying to look at some actual data of others. It's very typical to be around that 1%, give or take, half to 1.5% of your appraised value, and we're 0.55 of that.
Now, why does Boone not?
So Boone doesn't have a lot of debt. They have water and sewer debt. They don't have general fund debt. This is general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, they have water and sewer debt. Not a lot of progress either, I'd say. Questions? Fund balance. Questions on debt before I get into fund balance? All right, moving along. All right, fund balance and activity. So our general fund is balanced utilizing $194,000 in fund balance, which means we put this budget together, we had $194,000 more expenses than we did on the revenue side. So we, on the revenue side, said we're going to pull $194,000 out of fund balance on paper to balance the budget. We have used fund balance in the past. It's been $20,000, $30,000, not to this extent. Why do we do it? One, we're trying to keep the tax rate consistent. Two, we did add $800,000 to fund balance last year. We did project last year to not add anything to fund balance, standing here this time a year ago. However, things worked in our favor. Sales tax, TDA, others increased revenues, expenses were kept down. So we're able to add $800,000, which means we had a total unassigned fund balance at 6/30/24. That's our audit. That's what I've got sitting right here at $6.4 million or 48%. So if we were to utilize $194,000, that's about 1.5% is what that represents. Keep in mind, there's a couple things that we don't know. One, we don't know necessarily FEMA and how they're going to pay out. Currently today, we're at about $300,000. We've received a lot of FEMA money, but we're still waiting on some checks. We feel like we'll get it. That's one thing to keep in the back of your mind. The other is this loan. We're going to have to pay ourselves back for the park and the land purchases. These are going to have some impact, still somewhat unknown necessarily on the timing of what this looks like. That being said, we go with what we know. We balance the budget with fund balance at $194,000. That represents about 1.5% of unassigned fund balance is what we're saying there. Questions? All right, summary. Revenues are diversified. I think we know that. Property taxes, no property tax increase. We do have some of the lowest taxes from a rate standpoint and appraised value standpoint of the last reval of Northwest North Carolina. Our personnel, we're not asking for new FTEs, 2.5% COLA, and again, I showed you where we are, again, with a lot of comparisons of where we are, especially with our department heads, and our percentage overall being 48%. Compared to those that are in the 50s and 60s, and we were at 74%. Pretty drastic difference there. Operating costs are steady, capital costs remain steady and predictable as we utilize our fleet schedule. And our debt is on the downward trends, but the progress continues, and we've got some things that we know that are coming up. Questions on the general fund? All right, water and sewer, a little bit quicker, so I know we've had a lot of information. We did discuss this last time. I have not changed much at all within the water and sewer side of things. Again, water and sewer is a separate fund. It's a separate checking account. So take the general fund checkbook, put it over here, pick up the water and sewer checkbook. This checkbook has to balance. It's got to take care of itself. If it doesn't, and we start losing money or we're not able to pay our bills, we can't borrow it from the general fund. Not allowed. The only money we can give the general fund is for that time we talked about. That's it. So we have spent and been able to accomplish over $10 million worth of water and sewer projects the last 6 years. That means we do have some increased costs there from a debt service standpoint. We have new water meters that have been installed, new debt service as well. We know USDA debt is coming up. All that being said, we are proposed a 7% increase. That equals $4 a month or $8 per bill for water and sewer. The water fund is what it is, and I don't know how else to put that. The costs are the cost. It is hard for us to do much in the way of cutting costs there. We have the water plant and the wastewater plant, personnel-wise. We do not have the ability to cut there. We have to have operators. Our chemicals and our materials continue to go up. Luckily, they're not maybe going up as much as others, but they continue to go up, and the cost for what they are there as well. We have to treat our water. We have to have our materials that go into it. Again, we're not talking streets. We're talking, this is the water and sewer fund. This is just water and sewer cost. The great upgrades that we've made and are going to be making through the water plant, the wastewater plant, and the lift station are huge. Again, the only thing that you could say that we potentially had choices on are making these upgrades. That being said, we've upgraded our water lines, we've upgraded our lift stations and our PRVs, and we've got the plants coming. And I think that is a huge win for all of you and all of us because we are ahead of the game. I can tell you that. Again, look around our neighboring towns and you'll see water line breaks and things happening about every few days in some of these places without a lot of emphasis put on planned replacements. We're not sitting in the catbird seat, but we're heading in the right direction with a lot of these things. That being said, we have to increase rates, unfortunately, to be able to offset the cost for the water and sewer side of things. We do have some capital needs on the water and sewer side, and a backhoe to replace our aging backhoe. Can't remember the age of it.
15?
Yeah. A new truck and a leak detection system. So this is where I'm gonna ask Matt if he would tell us about the leak detection system. Put him on the spot for a few moments because I think this is going to be big. We have the new meters in place, and that's telling us what we need to know in the home. So when a home or a business has an issue, we know it within the hour most of the time. Maybe at 2 in the morning we don't, but as soon as we wake up, we find out about it. This is going to be within the system in the lines. So maybe if you would share just a few moments, Matt, about what that is.
Right, it's the AQS system through Ferguson, so it's basically listening devices that go on fire hydrants or valves. They have a program, they kind of take a map of our town with line types, line sizes, areas, known areas of problems, and project out where we need sensors. Kind of running a pilot through them to deploy these sensors. You can add sensors to the system as you go. We'll have the software to monitor that, and anytime it detects the acoustic sounds of a leak, abnormal usage or prolonged usage or whatever it may be on the lines, it will throw us notifications in real time. So we'll be able to know that between sensor 112 and 115 something's going on. So it will narrow our scope of our search for a leak drastically. We'll know within several hundred feet of where we're having an issue, pretty much instantaneous from when it starts monitoring. We can, like I said, we can add sensors. I can't remember the cost per sensor off the top of my head, but we can expand the system as much as we want to moving forward. This kind of gets us, I think, one area they were looking at was kind of one side back across the Mayview area, and I think it pretty much really gets kind of all of Mayview and one side with this one pilot. So it's going to knock a huge chunk of the town out. And like I said, each year we can add a few more sensors and keep spreading out.
Yeah, initial cost is $33,000 for the 20 sensors plus the software, et cetera. So we want to test it to make sure it works and make sure we understand it. But then ultimately, given that cost, I think it's about $1,000 a sensor, give or take. If it's working this time next year, we're going to be bringing back a proposal to probably put it throughout the system, because the one thing that we can't predict and we can't control right now is that we know that our meters are reading and we know there's not issues, but then we see on the water plant side of things that we're losing water all of a sudden. And there's not a worse feeling, and it always happens at 10 or 11 or 12 or 1 at night when we get the call and we're out searching, they're out searching, looking for these water leaks. Y'all have been out searching. This is hopefully going to eliminate that and give us real-time detection of what's going on within the system and pinpoint or co-locate where that leak is taking place.
Well, now, the old process we had till recently was the guy with the divining rod, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still there.
He's still there, so,
No joke, this guy's good.
yeah, we have a guy, and I said we have a guy, and that's, he's still around. I don't know what. He is good. He is a good, I mean, and it's a little more technical than that. He's using sonar, et cetera, right, kind of thing. We call him and he'll come up here at, 2 o'clock at night if we need to. And he'll help us start locating off of fire hydrants and pressure and things and what that looks like. So he's not going to be here one day. So yeah, this system is hopefully going to help us pinpoint that. But that is included in the capital needs. So 3 things: backhoe truck and leak detection system. Our debt, yes ma'am.
Can we go back?
Yes ma'am, of course. Further back? Yep.
Mhm. Remind me, the AMI, once that is paid for, that debt,
Goes away.
it goes
It
away.
does. Yeah, that's 10 years. So that's a 10-year loan. We're in year 2 of that. USDA is going to be a 40-year loan. That's a much longer. That starts this coming year, 26, 27. Yeah, so we're paying for the new debt that was a year new, and then we're also preparing for the new debt that's going to be coming up in 26, 27 for USDA.
Okay, thanks.
All right, to the point with debt, our water system is not as much, is not as dramatic as our general fund, really because one, we don't have as much. So we have, $4 million in total debt. That's going to change with the USDA next year. That's going to become, $8 million. This 3.5 is going to become 8 next year. That being said, we're not going to start paying for it until here. So it's not included yet because we haven't closed on the loan. We just know we're heading that direction. It doesn't make sense for us to put it a year out when we're doing annual budgets for 26, 25, 26. Our total debt service trends here, relatively consistent. This looks like it goes up a lot. That's that first half payment on the meter, full payment on the meter here is what that is. And then this is kind of showing that decrease. That being said, we know this year we're going to pick up another $200,000 on the USDA piece, half of it, and then the remaining piece comes there, if that makes sense. Questions on the water and sewer fund? Pretty short and sweet. There's not a lot compared to the general fund. The water and sewer fund, unfortunately, hate saying it, it kind of is what it is. The cost of doing business is the cost of doing business. We will constantly look for ways to be able to save on the water and sewer side. It's difficult. One thing I've mentioned, and I'll continue to mention, our water meters are fantastic. They're also a little bit of a negative because we're now utilizing or selling less water than we were before. Matt will tell you, because of these new meters and the fact that they're catching leaks and they're more efficient in what they're telling us, we don't necessarily have the same amount of water that we were selling before. Now, we don't have the same adjustments and bad customers as we had before, but we're selling less water today than we were a year ago. Not by a lot, but a little bit, which means, unfortunately, if our volume's not going up, we've got to change our rate to be able to offset that revenue with the expenses. That is all that I had for today. It is not. So I will now, before we get to the next step, stop for questions.
You've done a great job.
Yeah. We can go more in depth than anything. The point was to try to go through the revenues as much detail as I think we've seen changes, and then we get into operating expenses, capital, debt, and of course salaries and benefits. But any other questions you have, we've gone through fees, we've gone through the fleet maintenance, and we've gone through the debt service as well. Our next steps, if nothing nothing from today, is going to be our public hearing, which is going to be held on June 10th, 6 o'clock in this room at our typically scheduled, Tuesday meeting. That'll give the public a chance to come and speak towards all things to do with the budget, and then if you all see fit, potentially pass the budget that night. Do have to pass it before June 30th, so we have in the past come out of this night and not passed it. That's happened before, and then we've gone typically either to the next week or our summer retreat, which is in last week of June. And we've passed it there as well, so we've done different things. As of right now, I have it on to be presented and possible vote for June 10th. But questions, comments, changes, concerns, anything?
Aside from property tax, I get asked all the time about people's water bill.
Yes.
Why is it going up? Yeah, people are really concerned about the water bills.
Certainly. You know, the last thing that we want to do, and I tried to emphasize this, no one likes paying for property taxes or services and things of that nature they don't feel like they're necessarily getting the return on. I hope today helped put some stuff into light or perspective where we stand comparing ourselves to others, because it's difficult to look at just us in a lot of different ways and compare us depending on what that comparison is, who that is, because 1,300 person towns is not a fair comparison to us. We really need to get out to more of the full service towns when we start looking at it. All the data that I presented today is public knowledge. It's public record. It's either through the local government commission or it's through the League of Municipalities. You can go find other data and can challenge it if you want to, or the public can do that. That being said, the reason I put some of that stuff up there, full service towns, et cetera, is that's an important piece. There are very few towns, even of 10,000 or less, that do what we do here. So whether that means, we're looking at Lenore or Boone, which is our geographical neighbors, or whether that means we're going off mountain and looking at other places that are 10, 15, 20,000 person's town. That's really our comparisons. It's not 1,300. Again, because we are a full service town. Water, sewer, street, sanitation, police, fire, etc. We're the unicorn, as I kind of started this whole conversation a couple hours ago. We are truly that in so many different ways in what we do here. Doug, questions?
Doug, are you there?
Okay.
I had a question on, did we put anything away for sewer expansion?
We did not, and I'll tell you why we didn't this year. One, obviously, we've already proposed the increase. But I really think, as we talked at the retreat, the sewer expansion piece, kind of like the paving and the sidewalks, is going to be this upcoming retreat talking about a bond, because I think that's the best way and the easiest way to pay for it. We were putting 10,000 back or 15 or 20,000 back, and the numbers that we saw from Doug Chapman are much larger than that. So we can put some back, but I think it probably is going to end up in the same position that we were going to be in, which is utilizing some type of a bond or something in 26 or 27 for the sewer expansion.
And the only other one I had, in hearing on that is, if HB 765 was to pass, how much would this change this budget, or would it?
Well, we found a planning and zoning budget, so that would be zero. Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, in all joking, I don't think we know. I mean, I know what Ray said. I don't think anybody feels like the entire thing is going to pass, but what pieces of it passes makes a big difference. I mean, it does. It changes. It could change a lot. Our planning and inspection side of things, and I do mean this without sounding sarcastic. Is our budget there is not a large budget. It's our smallest of our functions that we do. Our total budget, 517,000. Not 517 is anything small, but if it does change, we're a little bit more flexible there. It's not as big of numbers as I suspect. And a lot of that's going to be on the revenue side. If they change our ways of permitting and zoning, but I don't think there's any way of knowing at this point. We're just we'd be shooting at in the dark at something.
Building inspections are the only thing we're required to provide in town.
Yeah, Kevin said building inspections are the only thing we're required to provide as a town. So you can look at our revenue and look over, if you take out our building, our zoning permits at 25,000, we've got some other miscellaneous stuff in there that we charge. So they're numbers, but they're not backbreaking numbers. We can figure it out if we need to. We have to change But, we'll be in that same boat with everybody in the state, I suppose, so. Let's hope it doesn't pass, right?
Exactly. Well, I thank you and your staff. I think you've done a great job this year.
Thank you.
I agree with Doug, and I think Councilman as well. I think y'all done a great job. Thank you. Our town has grown a lot, and because of you people, it's how we've been able to sustain and move forward. I thank you. Planning and zoning, well, I don't know, but I do have an announcement. The Virginia Fox's office, I contacted them about the post office parking issue. You notice the signage there says that you'll be charged after hour parking if you park in the post office parking lot. There's a letter coming from Virginia Fox's office. It will state that there'll be 30 minutes parking in the parking lot at any given time. They're gonna change the signage down there. The property owner has, said they would comply willingly. And so there'll be a letter coming, so if anybody hears about, oh gosh, I have to pay for parking, if I go down there and get my mail at 6 o'clock, that should not be the way it is. Okay? So.
Any other questions on the budget? All right, and we're gonna proceed with presenting it on the 10th again, and then have a public hearing.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Doug.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much for attending.
Second.